Hi guys. Tonight we step into a world so quiet, so distant that even the idea of history has not yet been imagined. There are no books, no cities, no names for time itself. Only the soft rhythm of breathing, the faint crackle of fire, and the slow turning of the earth beneath your feet. The air feels cooler here, cleaner somehow, carrying the scent of damp soil and distant trees. You stand at the edge of a wide open landscape where small groups of humans move quietly through tall grass, unaware that they are part of a long unfolding story. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, let me know where you are in the world right now and what time it is for you. There is something quietly comforting about knowing that while you listen, others are settling into the same calm moment across the globe. Now dim the lights and let yourself step forward. You move slowly down a gentle slope, your feet pressing softly into the earth. The ground is uneven, but familiar, shaped by countless footsteps over time. Ahead, a small group gathers near a fire. The flames are low, steady, not wild. They flicker just enough to push back the darkness, casting soft shadows that stretch and shift across the ground. A well-established understanding of early human life suggests that by around 300,000 years ago, early Homo sapiens had already developed the ability to control fire, a skill that changed everything about how they lived. You feel that change here. The warmth reaches you before you even sit down. It settles into your skin, easing the cool air that clings to your body. You lower yourself near the edge of the group, close enough to feel the heat, but not so close that it overwhelms you. No one speaks in the way you might expect. There are sounds soft and purposeful, but language, as you know, it has not fully formed. Instead, communication happens through movement, through shared attention, through quiet understanding. You notice how carefully everyone watches the fire. How each person seems to know exactly when to adjust a piece of wood, when to shift slightly closer, when to lean back. Nothing here feels rushed, and as you sit, you begin to sense something subtle. Time moves differently, not faster, not slower, but without the sharp edges you are used to. There are no clocks, no schedules, no urgent reminders pulling your attention forward. Instead, there is only a gentle flow from one moment to the next. And you might find yourself wondering, how did humans change in a world like this? How did evolution shape something so gradual, so quiet, that it could pass unnoticed by those living within it? You glance at the people around you. Their faces are familiar, yet not entirely like the ones you see every day. Their features are strong, shaped by long exposure to wind, sun, and cold. Their bodies carry a kind of efficiency, lean and capable, built not for comfort, but for survival. A mainstream historical insight tells us that early humans lived as hunter-gatherers, moving with the seasons, relying on their surroundings for food, shelter, and safety. Nothing was guaranteed. Every day required awareness, every decision mattered, and yet despite that constant pressure, there is a calm here. Not because life is easy, but because it is understood. You watch as one person carefully turns a piece of food over the fire. The smell drifts toward you, simple and earthy. There are no spices, no elaborate preparation, just heat, patience, and the quiet knowledge of what works. Some historians suggest that early human diets were far more varied than we often imagine, including not only meat, but also roots, fruits, and gathered plants, depending on the environment. Others disagree on just how balanced those diets were, pointing to evidence that different groups adapted in very different ways. You notice how nothing is wasted. Every movement has purpose. Every action fits into a larger rhythm. And slowly as you sit there, you begin to understand something deeper. Evolution at this point is not a concept. It is simply life. It is the way bodies respond over countless generations to cold nights like this one. It is the slow shaping of hands that can grip tools, of eyes that can see in low light, of minds that can remember where food was found and when it might return. But here is the quiet part that often goes unnoticed. No one here is aware of it. No one is trying to evolve. There is no goal, no plan, only the steady accumulation of small changes carried forward from one generation to the next. You lean back slightly, letting the warmth of the fire settle into you. Above the sky stretches endlessly, filled with stars that feel closer than they should. Without the glow of modern lights, the night reveals itself fully vast and detailed. A quirky detail often overlooked is that early humans likely experienced the night sky in a way we rarely do today, with the Milky Way clearly visible guiding movement and perhaps even shaping early forms of storytelling. You follow the line of stars for a moment. There is no rush to look away, no distraction pulling your gaze elsewhere, just the quiet presence of light, distant and steady. Behind you, the wind moves softly through those grass, creating a gentle, continuous sound. It blends with the faint crackle of the fire, the occasional shift of someone nearby, the slow rhythm of breathing. Everything feels connected, and as you sit there, you begin to sense something else. A kind of stillness. Not the absence of movement, but the absence of urgency. And this is where the story truly begins. Because in a world like this, where every challenge directly affects survival, change happens. Slowly, unnoticeably, but relentlessly. You might expect evolution to feel dramatic, sudden, obvious. But instead, it unfolds in moments like the quiet nights, shared warmth, small decisions that seem insignificant yet ripple outward across generations. You look at your hands, imagine them changing not within your lifetime but over thousands of years, slightly stronger, slightly more precise, better suited to the world around you. And then you realize something even more curious. At some point in the future, this process will begin to slow. Not stop completely, but change in a way that scientists are still trying to fully understand. Researchers continue to question exactly when and why human evolution began to shift from rapid physical adaptation to something more subtle, more hidden. And sitting here in the soft glow of firelight, it is almost impossible to imagine that change. Because everything around you feels so active, so responsive, so alive. You take a slow breath. The air is cool, but the warmth of the fire balances it perfectly. Nothing feels extreme. Nothing feels out of place. Just a steady, continuous flow of existence. And as your eyes begin to soften, as your thoughts slow to match the rhythm of this ancient night, you realize that you are not just observing the past. You are part of a moment where humanity is still becoming. Not finished, not defined, just beginning. And very, very slowly changing. You remain by the fire for a while longer, letting its warmth settle deep into your body. The quiet around you is not empty. It is full of small, steady movements. Someone shifts slightly. Another leans forward to adjust a piece of wood. The flames respond with a soft crackle, rising and falling as if breathing along with you. Eventually you stand, not abruptly, just a gradual decision. Your legs carry you away from the circle back into the open landscape. The night is still present, but it feels less enclosing now. Your eyes have adjusted. Shapes emerge more clearly. The ground, uneven but readable, stretches ahead with subtle variations in texture. You begin to walk, slowly, each step measured. The air brushes against your skin, cool but not biting. You notice how your body responds without effort. Your breathing remains steady. Your muscles move with quiet efficiency. A broadly accepted historical understanding suggests that early Homo sapiens developed bodies suited for endurance rather than speed, allowing them to travel long distances over varied terrain. You feel that here. There is no urgency in your movement, yet you sense that you could continue for hours if needed. You pass through tall grass that sways gently, whispering as it brushes against your legs. The sound is soft, repetitive, almost rhythmic. Somewhere in the distance you hear a faint call, not alarming, just part of the environment. A reminder that you are not alone in this world. Ahead, you begin to notice others, not gathered like before, spread out. Each person moving within their own small space, yet never entirely separate from the group. You slow your pace, watching, learning. One figure crouches near the ground, carefully brushing aside loose soil. Their movements are deliberate, focused. You step closer, staying quiet. In their hands you see something simple, a shaped stone, rough but intentional. A mainstream historical fact tells us that early humans created the stone tools using techniques like flaking, striking one rock against another to produce sharp edges. These tools were essential for cutting, scraping and processing food. You observe how the stone fits into their hand. Not perfectly, but well enough. You might find yourself thinking about how natural this seems, how intuitive. And yet this simple object represents something profound. It is not just a tool, it is a stay. A small adjustment in how humans interact with the world. Nearby, another person moves slowly along a narrow path, eyes scanning the ground. They pause, kneel, and gather something you cannot quite see. Perhaps roots, perhaps small plants. Their movements are quiet, practiced, almost invisible unless you are paying close attention. Some historians suggest that gathering plant-based foods may have contributed significantly to early human diets, providing reliable nutrition alongside hunting. Others continue to debate the balance between plant and animal sources, noting that it likely varied widely depending on location and season. You continue walking, your attention shifting from one detail to the next. A footprint in the soil, the faint outline of movement through grass, a cluster of stones arranged in a way that feels intentional. Nothing here is random. Everything carries meaning even if it's not immediately clear. And gradually you begin to notice something about how people move. There is no wasted energy, no unnecessary motion. Each step seems considered, but not in a way that feels forced. It is simply how they exist. Efficient, balanced, a quiet harmony between body and environment. You might compare this to modern life, where movement is often rushed, distracted, or shaped by artificial spaces. Here, every action is directly connected to survival. You reach a small rise in the land and pause. From here, you can see further. The group spreads across the landscape, loosely connected. Not clustered, but not isolated either. There is a shared awareness that holds them together even at a distance. A quirky detail often noted by researchers is that early human groups were relatively small, often consisting of a few dozen individuals, which allowed for strong social bonds and coordinated movement. You feel that now. Even without there is a sense of presence, of belonging, not defined by structures or rules, but by proximity and shared experience. You take a slow breath. The scent of earth rises gently. There is a faint hint of something else. Perhaps smoke carried from the fire behind you. It lingers just enough to remind you where you came from. As you continue forward, the ground begins to change slightly. The soil becomes firmer, the grass shorter. Your footsteps sound different here, softer, more contained. You notice a set of tracks, not human. They move in a line, crossing your path and disappearing into the distance. You pause again, observing. This is part of the world as well. Animals moving through the same space, sharing the same environment. A well-grounded historical understanding indicates that early humans developed keen observational skills, learning to read tracks and environmental signs to locate food and avoid danger. You follow the tracks for a short distance, not out of urgency, just curiosity. They lead you toward a small clearing where the land opens slightly. The sky above feels wider here. The stars stretch uninterrupted from one horizon to the other. You stand still, listening. There is a quiet balance here. Nothing dominates, nothing overwhelms. Just a continuous exchange between movement and stillness. And as you stand there, you begin to understand something subtle about evolution. It is not just about bodies changing. It is about behavior. Awareness, the ability to notice patterns, to adapt actions based on experience. These changes are not visible in the same way as physical traits, but they matter, perhaps even more than anything else. Researchers continue to question how much of early human evolution was driven by physical adaptation versus cognitive development, and how these two processes influenced each other over time. You look down at your hands again, then back at the landscape. Everything feels connected. Your body, the ground, the air, the movement of others. Nothing exists in isolation. And slowly, almost without realizing it, you begin to move again. Not because you need to, but because movement is part of the rhythm. Step, breath, step, breath. The pattern continues, unbroken, and somewhere within that steady rhythm change continues as well. Not dramatic, not visible, but constant. You walk for a while longer, letting the quiet guide you. There is no destination, no final point to reach. Only the experience of being here, of observing, of moving through a world where humans are still deeply shaped by everything around them. And as the night settles a little deeper, as the sounds soften and the air cools just slightly more, you begin to sense that this connection between humans and their environment is the foundation of everything that comes next. Because long before cities, before technology, before the idea of stopping evolution even exists, there is this: a simple walk through the land, a quiet awareness, and a species that is still in every moment, learning how to be. You continue forward, the rhythm of your steps steady and unbroken. The land stretches quietly ahead, gently rising and falling beneath your feet. Behind you, the faint glow of the fire has nearly disappeared, absorbed into the darkness of the night. Yet its warmth lingers in your body, a quiet reminder of where you came from. The air feels slightly cooler now, not harsh, just enough to make you aware of it. You draw a slow breath, and for a moment everything feels balanced. Your body, the temperature, the ground beneath you, all existing in a kind of quiet agreement. After some time, you begin to notice another flicker of light in the distance. Faint at first, then clearer. Another fire. You move toward it not out of urgency, but curiosity. As you approach, the shapes of people emerge again, gathered in a loose circle. Their silhouettes shift softly against the glow movements, slow and deliberate. You step closer. The warmth reaches you once more. This fire feels slightly different. Lower, more controlled. A mainstream historical understanding suggests that over time humans improved their ability to manage fire, learning not only how to create it, but how to sustain it for longer periods. This allowed for more stable living patterns and greater comfort during cold nights. You sit near the edge of the group again. The ground here is worn slightly smoother, as if many have sat in this same place before. There is a familiarity to it, a repeated use that has shaped the space over time. You notice how the fire is arranged. The wood is placed carefully, not randomly. Pieces are angled to allow air to move through, feeding the flames without overwhelming them. The result is a steady, even burn. You might find yourself thinking about how simple this looks, and yet how much knowledge is contained within it, not written, not spoken in complex language, but learned, passed on, remembered. Some historians suggest that the control of fire may have played a crucial role in human evolution, not only by providing warmth and protection, but by allowing food to be cooked, which made it easier to digest and may have supported brain development. Others continue to question how direct that connection was, pointing out that many factors likely contributed to these changes. You extend your hands toward the fire. The heat is gentle, consistent. It does not flicker wildly or shift unpredictably. It holds, and as you sit there, you begin to notice the subtle ways people interact with it. One person adds a small piece of wood, carefully placing it where the flame will catch without disturbing the structure. Another adjusts their position slightly, turning their body to receive more warmth. No one speaks loudly, no one directs, and yet everything remains balanced. You might compare this to modern life, where control often requires constant attention, adjustment, and intervention. Here, control is quieter. It is built into the way things are done. The fire continues to burn steadily. Its light softens the edges of everything around you. Faces become shapes. Details blur gently. The world feels smaller here, contained within the circle of warmth. Beyond it, the night stretches endlessly. You listen. The crackle of the fire, the soft shift of bodies, the faint sound of wind moving across the land. All of it blends into a kind of quiet rhythm, and slowly your thoughts begin to settle into that same pattern. A quirky detail that researchers often point out is that sitting around a fire may have encouraged longer periods of social interaction, giving early humans time to share experiences, observe one another, and possibly develop more complex forms of communication. You see hints of that now, not in words, but in presence, in shared attention. Someone gestures softly, another responds. A brief exchange, then stillness again. It is subtle, but meaningful. And as you watch, you begin to understand something deeper. Evolution is not always about dramatic change. Sometimes it is about these small repeated moments, sitting together, learning without formal instruction, observing patterns, adjusting behavior. These things do not leave obvious traces, but they shape everything. You shift slightly, feeling the texture of the ground beneath you. It is firm but not uncomfortable. Small particles press gently against your skin, grounding you in place. The warmth of the fire contrasts with the cool air at your back. A quiet balance. You tilt your head upward. The sky remains vast, unchanged, stars scattered across it in patterns that feel both random and precise. Without artificial light, the night reveals itself fully, and you might find yourself wondering how often early humans looked up like this, how those patterns influenced their thoughts, their stories, their sense of place in the world. Researchers continue to question the extent to which early humans understood or interpreted the night sky, with some suggesting that even simple observations could have laid the foundation for later forms of knowledge and belief. Yutsese again. Back to the fire. Back to the circle. Everything feels unrushed. And in that stillness you begin to notice something else. Change is happening here. Not visibly. Not within a single lifetime, but across many. The ability to control fire, to maintain it, to use it effectively. These are not just skills, they are advantages, and over time those advantages shape who survives, who thrives, and who passes on their knowledge. You might expect evolution to be something you can see clearly, a sudden shift, a noticeable difference, but instead it is more like this fire, slow, steady, sustained through careful attention and repeated action. You take another slow breath. The air carries the faint scent of smoke. It lingers lightly, not overwhelming, just present. You feel your body relax further. Your shoulders loosen. Your breathing deepens. And for a moment, there is nothing to do, nowhere to go. Just this. A quiet night, a steady fire, and a group of humans sitting together shaping their future in ways they cannot yet understand. You close your eyes briefly. Not fully, just enough to soften the world around you. The sounds remain. The warmth remains. The presence of others remains. And when you open them again, everything is still as it was, unchanged, yet slowly changing. You begin to realize that this is how evolution often works, not through sudden transformation, but through countless nights like this one, moments that feel ordinary, almost invisible, and yet over time, they become everything. You remain seated for a little while longer, letting the steady presence of the fire settle into your awareness. The warmth continues to spread gently through your body, easing any lingering tension. Around you, the others shift in small, almost imperceptible ways, each movement quiet and purposeful. After some time, you begin to notice how closely everything here is tied to the environment. Nothing feels separate. The air, the ground, the bodies around you all seem to move within the same rhythm. You slowly rise to your feet again. The transition is smooth, unhurried. You step away from the fire, feeling the immediate difference as the cool night air touches your skin. It is not uncomfortable, just noticeable. Your body adjusts almost instantly, as if it has done this many times before. And in a way it has. You begin to walk once more, your attention shifting inward as much as outward. There is a growing awareness now, not just of what you see, but of how your body responds to it. Your feet press into the earth with quiet confidence. Your balance remains steady even as the ground changes beneath you. Your breathing adjusts without effort, matching the pace of your movement. A well-grounded understanding of human biology tells us that over many generations, early humans developed physical traits that improved endurance, balance, and energy efficiency, allowing them to move across long distances with relatively low strain. You feel that efficiency now. Nothing feels wasted. Every motion serves a purpose. As you move through the landscape, you begin to notice subtle differences among the people you pass. Some are slightly taller. Others move with different rhythms. Some carry more visible strength, while others seem lighter, quicker. These differences are not extreme, but they are there. And slowly you begin to understand that this variation matters. Natural selection works through these small differences, shaping populations over time. Those whose bodies are better suited to their environment are more likely to survive and pass on their traits. Yet it does not feel like competition. It feels quieter than that, more like a gradual leaning in one direction over another. You pause near a small cluster of stones arranged in a loose circle. They're not random. There is intention in their placement, even if the exact purpose is not immediately clear. You crouch slightly, running your fingers over the surface of one stone. It is cool to the touch, smooth in some places, rough in others. You imagine how many hands have touched it before, how many times it has been moved, adjusted, used. Some researchers propose that even simple arrangements like this may have served early purposes, perhaps marking a place, supporting a task, or helping organize shared space. Others are less certain, suggesting that not all patterns we observe today were meaningful in the same way we interpret them now. You stand again. Your gaze shifts to the horizon. The land stretches outward, quiet and open, and you begin to notice something about how humans exist within it. They are not separate from the environment. They are shaped by it, constantly. The temperature influences where they move. The availability of food shapes their paths. The presence of danger sharpens their awareness. Everything feeds back into how they live and, over time, how they change. You might compare this to modern life, where environments are often controlled. Temperature adjusted with a switch, food available with little effort, danger minimized or distant. Here none of that exists, and because of that, the body remains deeply connected to its surroundings. You walk a little further, feeling the slight incline of the ground beneath your feet. Your muscles respond naturally, adjusting without conscious thought. This is something you begin to notice more clearly now. Adaptation is not only visible over generations, it is also present in every moment. Your body responding, adjusting, maintaining balance. A curious observation often noted in studies of early humans is that their physical activity levels were consistently high compared to modern standards, not through structured exercise, but through daily survival tasks that required constant movement. You feel that here. There is no separation between activity and rest. Movement is simply part of living. Even standing still feels active in a subtle way. Your body remains engaged, aware. You pause again, this time near a slight dip in the land where cooler air seems to gather. The temperature shifts just enough to be noticeable. You draw a breath and feel the difference as it enters your lungs. Cooler, sharper. You adjust your posture slightly, instinctively, conserving warmth. And in that small adjustment, you begin to see something important. Evolution is built on moments like this. Tiny responses, repeated over time. Those who respond more effectively, who conserve energy more efficiently, who adapt more smoothly, they are the ones who continue, not because they are stronger in an obvious way, but because they are slightly better suited. And that slight difference repeated across generations becomes significant. You look at your hands again, then at the ground, then at the horizon. Everything feels connected through this process of gradual change. Yet there is no awareness of it among those around you. No one is thinking about evolution. No one is trying to become something different. They are simply living, responding, existing within the conditions they have. And that's enough. You take a slow breath. The air feels steady. The night remains calm. There is no urgency pressing in, no sudden shift, just a continuous flow of small interactions between body and world. And as you stand there, you begin to realize something else. This kind of constant pressure, this close connection to the environment is what keeps evolution moving. It is what drives change, because every day presents challenges. Every moment requires adjustment, and over time those adjustments accumulate. You begin to walk again, slower now, more aware. Each step feels deliberate, not forced, but noticed. The ground beneath you, the air around you, the quiet presence of others, all contributing to a system that is always in motion, even when it feels still. And somewhere within that quiet motion, within the countless small responses and adjustments, the human body continues to be shaped. Not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily, patiently, in ways that are almost impossible to see from within a single lifetime. You move forward into the night, carrying that awareness with you. The understanding that every small interaction matters, that every subtle change contributes to something larger, and that long before humans ever asked why evolution might slow down, they were living in a world where it never stopped. You continue walking, your pace unbroken, your attention gently widening with each step. the land begins to change in ways that are almost too subtle to notice at first. The air feels thinner, cooler. The ground beneath your feet grows firmer, less forgiving. You pause for a moment and draw in a slow breath. It carries a sharper edge now. Sow, not painful, just different. As you move forward, the landscape opens into a broader stretch of terrain, where the grass becomes sparse and the earth shows through in patches of pale dry soil. In the distance, you see something that feels unfamiliar at first. A faint whiteness, not cloud, not mist, but something settled on the ground itself. You move closer, and slowly you begin to understand. Cold, real cold. A widely accepted historical view holds that during the Ice Age, which lasted for tens of thousands of years, large parts of the Earth experienced significantly lower temperatures, shaping not only the environment but the development of human populations. You feel that influence here. The air presses against your skin with a steady chill. The ground holds less warmth. Even your breath seems more visible, faintly drifting away as you exhale. You wrap your arms slightly closer to your body, not out of discomfort, but instinct, a small adjustment, a natural response. Ahead, a group moves carefully across the terrain. Their steps are slower now, more deliberate. You follow at a distance, observing. Their bodies are covered not in the way you might imagine with modern clothing, but with simple layers. Animal hides wrapped and secured, offering protection against the cold. You notice how they move together, closer than before. Not spread out like earlier. There is a quiet awareness here that warmth can be shared. That proximity matters. A detail often highlighted by researchers is that early humans in colder climates developed strategies not only through physical adaptation but through behavior such as using clothing shelters and group closeness to retain heat. You feel that strategy unfolding in front of you. No one speaks, yet everyone understands. You step forward, your feet pressing into the firmer ground. It feels slightly colder through your soles, the temperature transferring upward in a subtle but noticeable way. The sky above remains clear, but the light feels different, sharper, more distant. You might wonder how long humans lived in conditions like this. How many generations endured these cold stretches of time? Some scholars suggest that repeated exposure to colder climates may have influenced traits such as body proportions and fat distribution, helping conserve heat more effectively. Others remain cautious, noting that cultural adaptations often played just as important a role as biological ones. You continue walking, your breath steady, your body adjusting, and you begin to notice something about the pace of life here. It has slowed, not in a relaxed way, but in a careful way. Every movement is measured, energy is conserved, nothing is wasted. You watch as one person kneels near the ground, brushing away a thin layer of frost to reveal something beneath. Their hands move quickly but with precision. They retrieve what appears to be a small root or plant, holding it briefly before placing it into a simple container. Even here, life continues. Food is still found, but it requires more effort, more awareness. You feel the cold more clearly now, not overwhelming, but persistent. It does not fade. It remains, and your body responds in quiet ways. Your muscles stay slightly more engaged. Your movements remain efficient. Your posture adjusts to minimize exposure. These are not conscious decisions. They simply happen, and this is where the pressure of evolution becomes more visible. In environments like this, small differences matter more. The ability to retain heat, to find food efficiently, to move without wasting energy. These traits can mean the difference between continuing and not. You pause near a slight rise, looking out across the landscape. The whiteness spreads further here, patches of frost and ice catching the faint light. The world feels quieter, more still. Even the sounds are muted, as if absorbed by the cold air. A curious observation noted in studies of Ice Age environments is that sound can travel differently in colder, denser air, sometimes carrying further but also feeling sharper and more distinct. You listen. There is almost nothing, just the faint movement of wind, the soft crunch beneath distant footsteps. You take another breath. The air feels cleaner but also more demanding, and as you stand there, you begin to understand something deeper. This kind of environment does not allow for ease. It does not tolerate inefficiency. Every aspect of life here applies pressure, constantly, quietly, and over time that pressure shapes everything. You might compare this to modern life, where comfort is often maintained regardless of environment. Heating systems, insulated buildings, controlled spaces. The body no longer needs to respond in the same way, but here there is no separation. The environment is always present, always influencing. You begin to walk again slower now, more aware of each movement. The ground feels firmer, colder. The air presses gently against your face. Your breath remains steady, and within that steady rhythm you begin to sense the weight of time, not as something measured in hours or days, but in generations, in the slow shaping of bodies and behaviours across countless lives lived in conditions like this. You imagine those changes, subtle, gradual, traits becoming slightly more common, others fading, all without intention, without awareness, just the result of living in a world that demands adaptation. You look at the group ahead, moving together, sharing warmth, adjusting constantly. They are not thinking about evolution, they are so surviving. And yet in doing so, they are part of a process far larger than any single moment. You take one more slow breath. The cold air fills your lungs, then leaves just as quietly, and you realize that in places like this, under conditions like these, evolution does not feel like change. It feels like necessity, a quiet, persistent shaping of life, guided not by choice, but by the steady influence of the world itself. You continue forward, leaving the colder stretch of land gradually behind. The air softens just slightly as the terrain shifts again. The frost becomes less frequent, the ground a little more forgiving beneath your feet. Still cool, but no longer as demanding. Your body adjusts without effort. It always does. You move along a narrow path, one that feels faintly familiar, as if it has been walked many times before. The earth here is pressed down, more firmly shaped by repeated footsteps over long periods of time. And then you notice something, a sound. Not the wind, not footsteps. A sharp, rhythmic tapping. You slow your pace, listening. The sound comes again, stone striking stone. You follow it, moving carefully until you come upon a small group gathered near a cluster of rocks. They are seated low to the ground, their focus entirely on what is in their hands. You step closer, quietly, and there you see it, a piece of stone being shaped. One hand holds it steady, while another brings down a second stone with controlled force. The impact produces a sharp sound, followed by a small fragment breaking away. Again and again, each strike is precise, measured. A commonly accepted view in archaeology explains that early humans developed stone tool technologies such as the older one and later the Acheulean traditions, allowing them to create sharper and more effective implements over time. You watch closely. The person shaping the stone pauses briefly between strikes, examining the surface. Their eyes trace the edges, searching for the next point of impact. There is patience here, no rushing, no wasted motion. You might find yourself noticing how focused this process is. How much attention is required for something that at first glance seems simple. But it is not simple. It is learned, refined, passed down. A subtle insight often mentioned by researchers is that tool-making likely required not just physical skill, but also the ability to plan ahead to imagine the final shape before it exists. You see that now. Each strike is not random. It is part of a sequence, a quiet unfolding of intention. Nearby, another person works with a different piece of stone, scraping its surface to smooth and sharpen it. The sound is softer, more continuous, like a gentle whisper against the rock. You kneel slightly to observe more closely. The texture of the stone catches the light. Rough edges, sharper points, a form emerging from something once unshaped. And as you watch, you begin to understand something important. This is not just about tools. It is about thinking, about seeing possibilities in the world and acting on them. Some scholars have proposed that the development of tools played a significant role in the evolution of human cognition, encouraging problem-solving and forward planning. Others suggest that these abilities may have developed alongside tool use, influencing each other over time. You pick up a small fragment from the ground. It is cool in your hand, light, but sharp along one edge. You turn it slightly, feeling how it might be used. Cutting, scraping, shaping other materials. You set it back down gently. There is a respect here for these objects, not necessarily or to ceremonial sort of way, but in a practical one. They matter. They make survival easier. You glance around at the group. Each person is engaged in their own task, yet there is a quiet awareness of one another. Occasionally someone pauses to observe another's work, perhaps learning, perhaps comparing. There is no formal teaching, no instruction, just observation, imitation, practice. A curious detail that often goes unnoticed is that early tool-making techniques were likely learned through watching others, rather than direct explanation long before structured language developed. You see that now. Knowledge moving quietly from one person to another, without words, without circle. Yet effective. You sit back slightly, letting your gaze soften. The rhythmic tapping continues, stone against stone, a steady pattern, almost soothing, and within that pattern you begin to notice something deeper. Each tool created here reduces the immediate pressure of the environment. A sharper edge makes cutting easier. A better tool makes food preparation more efficient. Energy is saved. Time is gained. And over time, these small advantages begin to change how humans interact with their world. You might compare this to modern tools where technology often replaces effort entirely. Here, tools do not remove effort, but they shape it. They make survival more manageable, more predictable. You stand slowly, stepping back from the group. The sound of shaping continues behind you, steady, unchanging. You begin to walk again, and as you do, you carry that sound. So that sound with you. A reminder that something has shifted, not in the environment, but in how humans respond to it. This is where evolution begins to take on a new layer. Not just bodies adapting to conditions, but minds shaping solutions. And those solutions in turn influencing which traits become important. Dexterity, coordination, attention, patience. These qualities begin to matter more, and over time they are carried forward. You look at your hands again, imagining them becoming more precise, more capable, better suited to tasks like the ones you just observed. Not instantly, not dramatically, but gradually, across generations. You take a slow breath. The air feels steady again, the temperature balanced, the ground familiar beneath your feet. And within that familiar rhythm, you begin to sense a shift. The environment still shapes humans, but now humans are beginning to shape their environment as well. Just a little, just enough to matter. You continue forward, your steps soft and even. The night remains calm. The landscape stretches quietly ahead. And somewhere behind you, the sound of stone meeting stone continues. A small, steady signal of change. Not loud, not dramatic, but deeply important. Because in moments like this, evolution does not just respond to the world. It begins, very slowly, to reshape it. You move on from the steady rhythm of stone, shaping the faint tapping sound gradually fading behind you. The night feels softer again, the air less sharp, the ground more familiar beneath your feet. Your steps remain slow and even, guided more by instinct than direction. After a while, you begin to notice something different. Not in the land, not in the temperature, but in the sounds. At first, it is subtle. A low murmur almost blending into the background. Then as you draw closer, it becomes clearer. Voices, not fully formed, not structured in the way you might expect, but distinct. You slow your pace, listening carefully. Ahead, a small group sits together. Not around a fire this time, but in a slightly sheltered hollow, where the wind passes more gently overhead. Their faces turn toward one another, their attention shared, and they are making sounds. Short, rhythmic, repeated. You step closer, quiet as before. Observing. One person gestures with their hand pointing towards the distance. Another responds with a sound followed by a brief nod. A third adds a different sound, slightly longer, with a change in tone. There is something happening here. Something new? Something new. A commonly accepted perspective in human evolution suggests that early forms of language likely began with simple vocalizations combined with gestures gradually becoming more structured over time. You feel that process unfolding in front of you. It is not language as you know it. There are no complete sentences, no complex expression, but there is intention, meaning, connection. You sit nearby, careful not to interrupt. The sounds continue. Some are sharp and quick, others longer, softer. You begin to notice patterns, certain sounds repeated in similar situations, certain gestures paired with specific tones. It's not random, it is forming. A number of researchers propose that early communication systems may have relied heavily on shared context where Meaning was understood not just from sound, but from gesture, environment, and experience. Others question how quickly these systems developed into structured language, suggesting that the process may have taken far longer than we often imagine. You watch as one individual picks up a small object from the ground and holds it up. They make a sound short and consistent. Another person repeats the sound slightly altered. A third responds with a gesture. There is a quiet exchange happening, a building of shared understanding. You might find yourself thinking about how natural this seems, how simple, and yet how profound. Because this is more than sound, is the beginning of something that will eventually reshape everything about human life. You shift slightly, feeling the ground beneath you still cool but steady. The air carries a faint mix of scents. Earth, distant vegetation, a trace of smoke from somewhere far behind. The sounds continue, and slowly you begin to notice how they affect behavior. Movement becomes more coordinated. Attention shifts more quickly between individuals. There is less need for constant visual monitoring. Sound carries meaning, and meaning allows for more efficient interaction. A lesser-known observation sometimes discussed is that even small improvements in communication could have had significant effects on group survival, allowing for better coordination during hunting, gathering, and avoiding danger. You see hints of that now. A gesture paired with a sound. A response that follows almost immediately. A shared awareness that moves faster than before. You glance around the group. Their expressions remain calm, focused. There is no sign that they recognize the significance of what they are doing. No awareness that these small sounds will one day become something far more complex. They are simply communicating in the simplest way available to them. You lean back slightly, letting the sounds wash over you. There is a rhythm to them, not quite like music, but not entirely without a pattern either. And as you listen, you begin to sense something deeper. This is not just about survival, it is about connection, the ability to share attention, to express intention, to respond without needing constant physical cues. You might compare this to modern language where words flow easily, often without thought. Here, every sound carries weight. Every exchange requires presence. Researchers continue to explore how and when language became more structured, with some suggesting that key developments in brain function allowed for more complex speech, while others point to social interaction as the driving force behind its growth. You watch as the group slowly settles into a quieter state. The sounds become less frequent, more spaced out. Eventually they fade into silence. But the silence feels different now. Not empty, but full of something that remains. An understanding that lingers even without sound. You stand slowly, careful not to disturb the space. As you step away, you notice how your own awareness has shifted. You are listening more, not just to sounds, but to the spaces between them, the subtle cues, the shared attention. You begin to walk again, your steps soft, measured. And as you move through the night, you carry with you the sense that something has changed, not in the environment, but in how humans relate to one another. Communication has begun to take shape, and with it a new layer of evolution, not just physical, not just behavioral, but social. The ability to share information, to coordinate, to build understanding beyond immediate experience. You take a slow breath. The air feels steady. The night remains calm. And somewhere behind you, faint and distant now, the first fragile threads of language continue to form. Not yet fully realized, not yet defined, but present, growing, and quietly reshaping what it means to be human. You move forward again, leaving the soft echoes of early voices behind you. The night continues to stretch gently in all directions, calm and steady as if nothing has changed, and yet something has. The way people connect, the way they respond to one another, it lingers in your awareness as you walk. Your steps remain slow, even, grounded. After a while, you begin to notice another shift. This time it is not in sound, but in distance. The people you pass are no longer scattered loosely across the land. They are closer together now, not crowded but drawn inward, forming small clusters that move and rest within shared space. You slow your pace again, observing. A group sits near a low rise in the land, partially sheltered from the wind. Their bodies are angled toward one another, creating a quiet circle. There is no fire here, but there is warmth in their proximity. You step closer, carefully. No one reacts strongly to your presence. There is an openness here, a calm acceptance. You sit at the edge of the group just as you have before. And as you settle in, you begin to notice something subtle. People are not just existing side by side. They are aware of one another in a deeper way. A widely recognized understanding in anthropology suggests that early human survival depended heavily on cooperation within small groups where sharing resources and supporting one another increased the chances of survival. You see that clearly now. One individual holds a small amount of gathered food. Instead of keeping it, they extend it toward another. The exchange is simple, no hesitation, no sense of loss. Another person adjusts their position slightly, making space for someone else to sit more comfortably. These are small actions, but they carry meaning. You might find yourself wondering how such behaviors began, how trust formed in a world where resources were limited and survival was uncertain. Some researchers suggest that cooperation may have been reinforced through mutual benefit, where helping others increased the likelihood of receiving help in return. Others propose that emotional bonds, even in early forms, played a significant role in shaping group behavior. You watch as a child moves closer to an older figure settling quietly beside them. The older figure responds with a gentle shift, allowing the child to lean in. There is no instruction, no words, just an understanding, a connection. A lesser-known observation in studies of early human groups is that extended care for young individuals may have been a key factor in human development, allowing for longer periods of learning and social bonding. You see that here. Time is given. Attention is shared. The group functions not just as individuals but as a unit. You lean slightly forward, resting your hands on the ground. The earth feels cool, textured, steady. The air moves softly around you, carrying faint scents from the surrounding land. Everything feels balanced. And within that upsani, you begin to notice how cooperation changes the nature of survival. When individuals act alone, every task must be done independently. Every risk faced individually. But here tasks are shared. Awareness is distributed. One person watches while another works. One gathers while another rests. Energy is managed collectively. You might compare this to modern life where independence is often emphasized, yet people still rely on complex systems of support without always noticing it. Here, that reliance is direct, visible, immediate. You watch as someone stands and moves a short distance away, scanning the horizon. Their posture is alert, but not tense. After a moment, they return, settling back into the group. No announcements. Announcement. No explanation, and yet everyone seems to understand. This is part of the rhythm, shared responsibility. A detail sometimes overlooked is that early human groups likely relied on informal roles where individuals contributed in different ways depending on their abilities rather than fixed positions or hierarchies. You see that now? There is no leader giving orders, no structure imposed from above, and yet everything functions quietly, effectively. You take a slow breath. The air feels calm, the night remains steady. And as you sit there, you begin to understand something deeper about evolution. It's not only shaped by the environment, it is shaped by relationships, by how individuals interact, by how they support one another. Traits that encourage a cooperation, awareness of others, the ability to read subtle cues. These become important, not because they are required for survival in a direct sense, but because they improve the group's ability to function as a whole. You look around at the people beside you. Their movements are small, subtle, but coordinated, a shared rhythm, a quiet synchronization, and slowly you begin to sense how powerful this is, because when individuals are connected in this way, survival becomes more stable, less uncertain, more predictable, and with that stability something begins to shift. The constant pressure of the environment softens slightly, not completely, but enough to make a difference. You might not notice it immediately. It is too gradual, too subtle. But over time, this shared way of living begins to change the conditions under which evolution operates. You lean back slightly, feeling the ground support you. Your breathing slows, your body relaxes. There is a sense of safety here, not absolute, but present. And that presence matters. Because in a world where survival is uncertain, even a small increase in safety can change how individuals live, how they behave, and eventually how they evolve. Researchers continue to explore how social structures influenced human evolution, with some suggesting that cooperation may have reduced certain survival pressures, while others argue that it introduced new forms of complexity that shaped human development in different ways. You sit quietly for a while longer, letting the stillness settle in. The group remains calm, connected, and as you eventually rise and begin to move again, you carry with you the sense that something essential has taken root. Not in the body, not in the environment, but in the space between individuals, a quiet bond, a shared existence. And within that shared space, humanity begins to change, not alone, but together. You step away from the quiet circle, the warmth of shared presence lingering behind you like a soft echo. The land opens again as you move forward wider, now stretching beyond what you can easily take in at once. Your pace remains slow, unhurried. The ground beneath your feet feels familiar, yet the direction you're moving carries a subtle sense of change. You begin to notice movement, not just nearby, but further out. Groups, small at first, then more, spread across the land, each following its own path, yet all moving with a similar quiet determination. You slow slightly, watching. Some move along ridges where the ground is firmer. Others follow lower paths where water might collect during warmer seasons. No one rushes. No one hesitates. There is a steady forward motion. A widely accepted understanding in human history suggests that early Homo sapiens gradually migrated out of Africa, spreading across continents over tens of thousands of years, adapting to new environments along the way. You feel that movement here, not as a single journey, but as countless small ones, step by step, generation by generation. You begin to walk alongside one of the groups, keeping a respectful distance. Their pace is steady, their attention divided between the ground ahead and the horizon beyond. You notice how they carry what little they have. Simple items, tools, food gathered along the way. Nothing unnecessary. Everything has purpose. You might find yourself thinking about how different this is from modern travel, where movement is often fast planned and supported by system. Here movement is part of life itself. There is no separation between journey and existence. You pass a stretch of land where the vegetation changes slightly. The plants are different here. Thicker in some areas, sparse in others. The group slows, observes, adjusts. One person kneels examining the ground. Another scans the distance. A third shifts direction, slightly guiding the group along a new path. No discussion, no visible planning, and yet the movement remains coordinated. Some researchers suggest that early human migration was not driven by a single cause, but by a combination of factors such as climate shifts, food availability, and population pressures. Others emphasize the role of curiosity and exploration as quiet but powerful influences. You continue walking. The landscape unfolds gradually. You begin to notice signs of previous presence. Faint markings, worn paths, small clusters of stones. Evidence that others have passed through here before. You pause briefly, placing your foot into a shallow impression in the ground. A footprint. Not fresh, but not entirely faded. You lift your foot and continue. There is a sense of continuity here, of paths being formed and followed over time. A detail often highlighted in studies of early human movement is that migration routes were not always direct or permanent, but shifted with changing conditions, creating patterns that evolved over generations. You feel that fluidity now. There is no fixed destination, no final place to reach, only movement shaped by need, by opportunity, by awareness. You walk for a while longer. The air changes again, slightly warmer now. The ground softens. The sounds of the environment shift. You hear more movement in the distance. Animals, birds, life adapting alongside you. You begin to understand that migration is not just about humans. It is part of a larger system. Everything moves. Everything adjusts. You glance at the group beside you. Their steps remain steady. Their posture relaxed but attentive. They are not rushing towards something. They are responding to what is around them. And in that response, they are shaping their future. You might wonder how many generations it takes for such movement to create lasting change. How far a group travels before differences begin to appear, in appearance, in behavior, in adaptation. Researchers continue to explore how human populations diversified as they spread across different environments, with some suggesting that isolation and local conditions played key roles in shaping variation. You feel that possibility here. Each step into a new environment introduces new challenges, new conditions, new pressures, and over time those pressures influence which traits become more common. You slow your pace slightly, looking out across the land. It stretches farther now, the horizon more distant, the sky wider above you. There is a sense of expansion, of possibility. You take a slow breath. The air feels different again, carrying new scents, new signals. Your body registers them quietly, adjusting without effort. And in that adjustment, you begin to sense something important. Migration does not just move humans across space. It exposes them to variation, to difference, to change, and that exposure becomes part of the evolutionary process. You continue forward, your step soft, measured. The group beside you moves with the same rhythm, together yet independent, connected yet free to adjust. The landscape continues to shift, gradually, subtly, and as it does so do the people moving through it, not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, patiently. Over time, you look back briefly. The path behind you is no longer visible. Only the memory of movement remains, and ahead there is only more land, more change, more quiet adaptation. You turn forward again, continuing, because in a world like this, to stop moving is not an option. And within that endless movement, humanity spreads, adapts, and quietly becomes something new. One step at a time, you continue walking alongside the group, your steps matching their quiet, steady rhythm. The land feels more familiar now, not because it has stayed the same, but because you have begun to understand how to move within it. The air is calm, the ground steady, nothing feels urgent. And yet beneath that calm, there is always a quiet tension, a need to respond, to adjust, to survive. You notice it in small ways. A sudden pause when a distant sound shifts, a slight change in direction when the wind carries a new scent, a careful step around uneven ground. These moments are subtle, but they matter. A well-grounded understanding of early human life suggests that survival required constant awareness of the environment, where even minor changes could signal opportunity or danger. You feel that awareness now, not as anxiety, but as attention, a steady readiness. You walk for a while longer until the group slows near a stretch of land where the vegetation grows thicker. The plants here are taller, dense, offering both resources and uncertainty. The group spreads slightly, each person scanning, observing. One rushes forward. No one retreats. There is a balance. You follow their lead, your own movements becoming more careful. The ground is softer here, holding impressions more easily. You notice tracks again, some familiar, others less. You crouch, briefly examining them. Different shapes. Shapes. Different sizes, some deeper, some lighter. A commonly accepted idea in anthropology is that early humans developed the ability to interpret tracks and environmental clues, allowing them to locate food sources and avoid threats. You see that skill in action. One person gestures softly toward a set of tracks. Another nods, adjusting their position slightly. A third begins to move in a new direction, guiding the group without words. The response is immediate. Coordinated. You stand again following. There is no hesitation, no debate, just a shared understanding. You might find yourself wondering how often decisions like this shape survival. How many times a correct interpretation led to food, or safety, or continuation, and how often mistakes carried consequences. Researchers continue to examine how decision-making in early human groups influence survival, with some suggesting that individuals who are better at interpreting environmental signals may have had a greater impact on group success. You walk quietly, your senses engaged. The air carries more scent here. Earth, plants, something faintly animal. You notice how your body responds. Your breathing becomes slightly more controlled. Your steps lighter. There is a quiet shift from movement to attention, and in that shift you begin to understand something deeper. This is where evolution becomes visible in behavior, not just in physical traits, but in how individuals respond to complexity, to uncertainty, to change. You watch as the group pauses again. One person kneels reaching toward the ground. They brush aside leaves, revealing something beneath. Food, simple, but valuable. The group gathers briefly, each person taking only what's needed, nothing more. An often overlooked detail in studies of early human societies is that resource sharing may have helped stabilize group survival, reducing the impact of unpredictable environments. You see that balance here? No one takes too much, while one is left without. You straighten slowly, your gaze moving outward again. The landscape feels different now, not because it has changed, but because you are seeing it differently. You are noticing patterns, connection, small signals that carry meaning. You begin to walk again, the group spreading slightly as they move, each person maintaining awareness of the others, connected, but not confined. And as you move, you begin to sense how every moment of survival feeds into the process of change. Every correct decision, every successful adaptation, these are not isolated events. They accumulate over time, across generations. You might expect evolution to be driven by large, dramatic events, but here it feels quieter, built on countless small successes and occasional failures. You take a slow breath. The air feels steady, the temperature balanced, your body relaxed but ready, and within that steady state you begin to notice something else. Survival is not just about reacting, it is about anticipation, the ability to sense patterns, to predict, to adjust before a challenge fully appears. Some researchers propose that this ability to anticipate may have played a significant role in human development, shaping cognitive processes that allowed for more flexible responses to changing environments. You feel that now, in the way the group moves, in the way they pause before acting, in the way they read the world around them. You continue forward, your steps soft. The ground beneath you feels slightly uneven again, but your balance remains steady. The sounds around you shift gently. Nothing sudden, nothing disruptive, just a continuous flow. And within that flow, you begin to sense the weight of repetition. These decisions, they happen every day, again and again, and each time they reinforce patterns, strengthen responses, shape behavior. You look at the group head. Their movements are calm, efficient, purposeful. They are not thinking about evolution. They are not aware of the long process unfolding. They are simply surviving. And yet through that survival, they're constantly shaping what comes next. You take another slow breath. The air fills your lungs, then leaves just as quietly. And as you continue walking through this steady, responsive world, you begin to understand that evolution is not something separate from life. It is life, a continuous process of responding, adjusting, and carrying those responses forward, one quiet moment at a time. You continue moving with the group, your steps settling into a rhythm that now feels almost effortless. The land no longer feels unfamiliar. It feels readable. Each change in texture, each shift in scent, and each subtle sound carries meaning. And yet something else is beginning to change, not in the environment, but in the way life unfolds within. You notice it first in the pace. The group is not moving as far as before. Their steps still steady but shorter, more contained. They pause more often, stay longer in certain places. You slow as well, adjusting naturally. There is no signal, no decision spoken aloud, but the pattern is clear. A broadly accepted view in early human studies suggests that over time some groups began to develop more regular movement patterns, returning to familiar areas where resources were known to exist. You feel that familiarity now. The group moves through a space that seems remembered, not marked by signs or structures, but known through experience. You pass a cluster of trees. The ground beneath them is slightly disturbed, as if it has been used before. Nearby stones are arranged in a loose, functional way. Nothing elaborate, but not random. You pause briefly, taking it in. This place has been here before, not in a permanent sense, but in memory. Some researchers suggest that early humans may have developed mental maps of their surroundings, allowing them to navigate and revisit locations with reliable resources. Others remain cautious, noting that the extent of this spatial awareness is difficult to measure directly. You begin to walk again. The group spreads slightly, but not as widely as before. There is a tendency now to remain within a certain range, a quiet boundary, not enforced, but felt. You might compare this to modern routines where people return to the same places day after day. Here the pattern is less rigid, but the idea is similar. Familiarity begins to shape movement. You notice how the group interacts with the space. One person moves toward a patch of ground where plants grow more densely. Another heads toward a shaded area where the soil appears softer. A third checks a nearby rise, scanning the horizon. Each action seems connected to memory, to previous experience. An interesting observation often discussed is that repeated use of certain locations may have gradually led to more stable patterns of living even before permanent settlements existed. You feel that stability here, not fixed, but emerging. You sit for a moment on a low smooth stone. The surface is cool but comfortable. You imagine how many times it has been used in this way, not intentionally shaped, but shaped by repetition, by presence. The air feels steady, warmer than before, less demanding. You notice how your body responds. Your posture relaxes slightly. Your movements become less guarded. And in that subtle shift, you begin to sense something important. When the environment becomes more predictable, the pressure to constantly adapt begins to ease. Not disappear, but soften. You might wonder what this means for evolution. If survival becomes slightly more stable, if challenges become more familiar, does the need for rapid change begin to slow? Some scholars suggest that as humans gained greater control over their surroundings, the intensity of natural selection may have shifted, favouring different traits than before. Others argue that new forms of pressure simply replace the old ones, shaping evolution in less obvious ways. You stand again, moving slowly through the space. Everything feels quieter, more contained. The group continues its activity, but without urgency. There is time here, time to observe, time to adjust, time to repeat what has worked before. You watch as one person returns to the same spot where they had previously found food. Their movements are confident, familiar, they know where to look, know, and often they find what they expect. This predictability matters. It reduces uncertainty. It allows energy to be used more efficiently. A subtle point sometimes raised is that even small increases in environmental predictability can have a significant impact on how organisms allocate effort and attention. You feel that shift now. Less scanning, more knowing, less reacting, more anticipating. You begin to walk again, your steps softer, your awareness slightly more inward. The landscape still changes, but not as dramatically, not as often. There is a sense of rhythm to it now, a cycle. You might not see it fully yet, but you can feel it. The return of certain conditions, the reappearance of familiar patterns, and within that rhythm you begin to understand how stability begins to take root. Not all at once, not everywhere, but in small pockets, places where humans learn to rely on what they know. You take a slow breath. The air feels calm, the temperature balanced, your body relaxed. And as you move through this space, you begin to sense that something is shifting in the long process of evolution. Not stopping, not ending, but changing direction. The constant, unpredictable pressure of the environment is giving way in some places to something more stable, more manageable. And with that shift, the kind of traits that matter may begin to change as well. You look at the group. Their movements are calm, their actions familiar, their survival for this moment secure. And in that quiet security, a new phase begins to emerge, one where evolution is no longer driven only by harsh conditions, but also by the growing presence of stability and the subtle ways it reshapes how humans live. You remain within this quieter space for a while, noticing how the rhythm of life continues without urgency. The group moves in familiar patterns, each action flowing naturally into the next. There is less searching now, less wandering, more returning, more repeating. You walk slowly along the edge of the area, your attention drawn to small details that might have gone unnoticed before. A cluster of stones arranged more carefully than others, a patch of ground cleared of debris, a place where footsteps seem to gather more densely. These are not structures, not permanent, but they are not accidental either. A widely accepted perspective in early human studies suggests that long before formal settlements, humans began to create meaningful spaces through repeated use, marking certain locations as important without building lasting structures. You feel that importance here, not through these signs, but through familiarity. You pause near a shallow depression in the ground. The soil's softer here, slightly worn down, as if people have sat or rested in this exact spot many times before. You lower yourself slowly. The ground supports you. Cool. Steady. You look around. Others are nearby but not crowded. Each person occupies their own space yet remains within the shared area. There is a quiet understanding of distance, of presence, of belonging. And as you sit there, you begin to notice something else. Patterns, not just in movement, but in behavior. One person begins a task that you have seen before, preparing food. Another gathers materials. A third watches the surroundings. These roles are not assigned, not fixed, but they repeat. A point sometimes discussed in anthropology is that early forms of routine may have emerged naturally from repeated activities gradually shaping the structure of daily life without formal organization. You see that unfolding now, not as rules, but as habits. Habits that become expectations. Expectations that guide behavior. You might compare this to modern routines where daily actions are often structured by time and obligation. Here the structure is softer, shaped by the necessity and experience rather than external schedules. You lean forward slightly, running your fingers through the soil. It feels different here. Finer, more disturbed. You imagine how many times this ground has been touched, moved. A subtle observation often noted is that early human spaces may have carried a kind of memory, not through written record, but through physical traces left behind by repeated use. You feel that memory now, not something you can read directly, but something you can sense. You stand again, your movement slow and quiet. The air remains calm, the temperature steady, nothing presses against you. And within that calm, you begin to notice how something new is forming. Not in tools, not in bodies, but in meaning. Certain places begin to feel different, not because they offer better resources, but because they have been used before, shared before, remembered. You watch as someone returns to a specific spot and begins an action that clearly belongs there. The motion is confident, familiar. There is no searching, no hesitation. They know where to go and what to do. Some researchers suggest that the development of shared spaces may have contributed to early forms of cultural behavior where meaning is attached to locations through repeated use and collective memory. Others remain cautious, noting that interpreting these early patterns is complex and often uncertain. You begin to walk again, slowly circling the area. Your steps are lighter now, more relaxed. There is a sense of safety here, not complete, but present, and that presence changes how people behave. Less constant scanning, more time spent on tasks, more attention given to one another. You might wonder how this affects evolution. If survival becomes less immediate, less uncertain, does the pressure for rapid adaptation begin to ease? Or does it simply shift into something else? Researchers continue to explore how cultural development may have influenced human evolution, with some suggesting that learned behaviors began to play a larger role alongside biological change. You feel that shift now. Knowledge is not only carried in the body, it is carried in action, in repetition, in shared experience. You pause once more, looking across the area. The group moves within it with quiet confidence. This is not a random place. It is known, understood, and in that understanding, something important takes shape. The beginning of culture, not written, not formal, but real. A shared way of living, of doing things, of returning to what works. You take a slow breath. The air feels gentle, your body relaxed. And as you stand there, you begin to understand that this shift from constant movement to repeated patterns, from pure survival to shared meaning, changes the nature of human life. It introduces stability, not complete, but enough to alter the balance, enough to begin changing how evolution unfolds. Because when behavior can be learned and passed on without genetic change, the body no longer needs to adapt as quickly. And in that space between biology and culture, something new begins, a quieter form of change, one that moves through memory, through habit, through shared experience. You begin to walk again slowly, leaving the area behind. But the feeling remains, a sense that humanity is no longer shaped only by the world around it, but also by the meanings it creates within it. You continue walking, gradually leaving behind the familiar space where patterns had begun to settle. The land opens once more, though it no longer feels entirely unknown. There is a quiet sense now that certain places hold memory even as you move away from them. Your steps remain slow, measured. The air feels warmer here, not by just enough to soften the edge of the night. As you move forward, you begin to notice something different in the landscape. The ground appears more disturbed in certain areas, not randomly, but in patches. You slow your pace, observing. Ahead, a small group gathers near one of these patches. They are not simply passing through, they remain in place longer than you have seen before. You step closer, quietly, and as you approach, you begin to understand. The ground has been worked, not deeply, not with complex tools, but intentionally. A widely recognized understanding in human history explains that the shift toward early forms of agriculture began around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, marking a major transition from hunting and gathering to cultivating plants. You see the earliest hint of that here. One person kneels using a simple tool to loosen the soil. Another places something into the ground. Seeds, though you cannot see them clearly. The motion is careful, repeated, purposeful. You watch as they press the soil gently back into place. There is patience here, an investment in something that will not provide immediate return, and that alone feels different. You might find yourself reflecting on how unusual this is compared to everything you have seen so far. Most actions have been immediate, gather, eat, move, but this is different. This is waiting. Some researchers suggest that the decision to cultivate plants may have emerged gradually as humans began to notice patterns in plant growth and experimented with influencing those patterns. Others argue that environmental pressures may have pushed groups toward more controlled food production. You remain still observing. Another person moves through the area, checking the ground where similar work has been done. Their attention is focused but calm. There is no urgency, only care. You look around. The group does not move far. They remain near this space, returning to it, watching it, and slowly you begin to sense the shift. Movement is no longer constant. It becomes selective. You might compare this to modern life, where planting something often comes with the expectation of future growth. Here that idea is new, uncertain, but present. You crouch slightly, touching the soil. It feels softer here, looser, recently disturbed. The texture lingers on your fingertips. You imagine the effort required to shape even this small patch of land. Repeated actions. Over time, a detail sometimes overlooked is that early cultivation likely required a great deal of trial and error, with many attempts failing before reliable methods were established. You see that possibility here. Not every patch looks the same. Some appear more successful, others less so, but the effort continues. You stand again, stepping back slightly. The air carries a faint scent of earth. Stronger here, richer. You notice how the group organizes itself around this space. Some work, some watch, some rest nearby. The roles shift naturally, but the focus remains. This place matters. And in that importance, something fundamental begins to change. Food is no longer only found. It is influenced, guided, encouraged to grow. You begin to walk slowly along the edge of the area, taking in the details. Small markers, subtle boundaries. Nothing formal, but enough to define the space. A concept often discussed in studies of early agriculture is that the act of cultivating land may have introduced new ideas of ownership, territory, and long-term investment. Not all scholars agree on how quickly these ideas developed, but the connection is often explored. You feel that shift here, not as possession, but as attachment, a connection to a place that provides. You take a slow breath. The air feels steady, the temperature balanced, and your body, once constantly adjusting to movement, it begins to mirror this new stillness. You notice how your posture relaxes, how your attention lingers in one place longer, and in that stillness you begin to understand something important. When humans begin to shape their environment in this way, the nature of survival changes. The constant need to move is reduced. The unpredictability of food begins to lessen. Not completely, but enough to make a difference. You might wonder what this means for evolution. If food becomes more reliable, if survival becomes more stable, does the pressure to adapt physically begin to ease, or does it shift towards something else? Researchers continue to explore how the transition to agriculture affected human biology, with some suggesting that it led to changes in diet health and physical structure, while others highlight the growing importance of cultural and social adaptation. You look once more at the group. Their movements are steady, focused. They are not aware of the long-term impact of what they are doing. They are simply responding to opportunity, to observation, to possibility. And yet this moment carries weight, because in choosing to stay, to return, to invest in a place, humans begin to change their relationship with the world. You take one more slow breath. The scent of soil remains, grounding, steady. And as you begin to move again, slowly leaving the cultivated patch behind, you carry with you the sense that something has shifted in a way that cannot be undone. A quiet turning point, where survival begins to depend not only on adaptation, but on creation. And from this point forward, the path of human evolution will never be quite the same. You move slowly away from the worked earth, but the feeling of that place lingers with you. The softened soil, the careful movements, the quiet patience of waiting for something to grow. The land ahead feels different now, not because it has changed dramatically, but because you have. Your attention shifts more easily towards places that feel familiar, toward patterns, toward stability. You walk along a gentle rise, your steps steady and unhurried. The air remains calm, carrying faint traces of warmth from the ground below. The night feels less vast than before, more contained, as if the world has begun to organize itself into places of meaning. After a while, you begin to notice something subtle. Groups are no longer moving as widely. They stay closer to certain areas, returning, circling, remaining. You slow your pace, observing. Ahead, a small cluster of people has gathered near a sheltered space. The ground there appears smoother, more worn, as if it has been used repeatedly over time. You step closer, quietly. And as you approach, you begin to recognize a pattern. This is not a temporary pause. This is a place where people stay longer. A commonly accepted understanding in early human history is that as agriculture began to take hold, some groups started to adopt more settled ways of living, remaining in one place for extended periods rather than constantly moving. You feel that shift here, not fully settled, but leaning in that direction. You sit near the edge of the group as you have done before. The ground beneath you is familiar, flattened, softened by repeated use. You notice how the space is arranged, not formally, but with intention. Sleeping areas, places for working, small zones that serve different purposes. Nothing marked clearly, yet understood. A perspective often explored by the researchers is that early sedentary life gradually led to the development of more organized spaces even before formal architecture existed. Others suggest that this process varied widely depending on environment and available resources. You observe how people move within this space. Their paths are shorter now, more contained. They do not travel far to complete tasks. They remain within a defined area. You might compare this to modern homes where everything needed for daily life exists within a limited space. Here, that idea is just beginning to form. You watch as one person arranges materials near the ground, creating a simple resting place. Another adjusts a covering made from hide, securing it against a light breeze. A third tends to a small fire, keeping it steady and controlled. There is a sense of maintenance here, of care, of preserving what has been created. An interesting detail sometimes noted is that early shelters were likely simple and temporary, yet their repeated use may have contributed to a growing sense of place and stability. You feel that stability now. It is not permanent, not guaranteed, but it is present, and that presence changes how people live. You lean back slightly, feeling the ground support you. Your body relaxes more easily. There is less need to remain constantly alert, not because danger is gone, but because the environment feels more predictable. You take a slow breath. The air is warmer here, protected, held within the small space created by the group. And in that warmth, you begin to notice something important. Comfort, not in the modern sense, but in a simple physical way. Shelter from wind, a place to rest, a space to return to. You might wonder how this affects the body. If the environment becomes less demanding, if exposure to harsh conditions is reduced, does the need for certain physical adaptations begin to lessen? Some researchers suggest that the transition to more settled living may have reduced certain environmental pressures while introducing new challenges related to population density and resource management. You watch as the group settles into a quieter rhythm. Movement slows. Tasks become more repetitive, less varied. There is time here. Time to rest. Time to focus on specific activities. Time to remain. A subtle observation often discussed is that as humans began to stay in one place longer, the structure of daily life may have become more predictable, shaping not only behavior but a social organization. You feel that predictability now. It is gentle, soothing. Your thoughts begin to slow. Your breathing deepens. The constant need to move, to search, to adapt begins to fade into the background. And in that fading, you begin to understand something deeper. When life becomes more stable, evolution begins to change. Not because it stops, but because the pressures that once drove rapid change are reduced. The environment is no longer as unpredictable. The challenges are no longer as constant. And with that, the pace of adaptation begins to shift. You look around at the group. Their bodies are at rest. Their movements calm. Their lives for this moment secure. They are not aware of the long-term implications. They are simply living within the conditions they have created, and yet those conditions matter. They reshape the balance between human and environment. You take one more slow breath. The warmth of the space surrounds you. The ground feels steady beneath you. And as you sit there, you begin to sense that this shift towards settled life, toward comfort and predictability, is one of the quiet turning points in human history. Because from here, the need for constant physical adaptation begins to soften, and in its place, new forms of change begin to emerge, slower, subtler, and harder to see. You remain within this settled space for a while longer, letting the quiet rhythm of life continue around you. The air feels warmer here, gently held within the boundaries of shelter and shared presence. The ground beneath you is familiar now, shaped by repeated use, softened by time. Nothing feels rushed. Nothing feels certain. And slowly you begin to notice something else taking shape. Structure, not in the sense of walls or buildings, as you might imagine today, but in patterns, in organization, in the way space is used. You stand and begin to walk through the area, your steps light, careful not to disturb what has been created. You pass a small fire, contained and steady. Nearby materials are arranged in a way that suggests purpose rather than chance. You notice how certain areas are used for specific tasks. One space for preparing food, another for resting, another for storing gathered items. There are no clear boundaries, no markers, yet the separation is understood. A broadly recognized idea in early human development is that as groups became more settled, the organization of space became more defined, laying the groundwork for later forms of structured living. You feel that organization here, not rigid, but present. You move further and the space begins to feel more enclosed, not fully sheltered, but shaped. There are simple coverings stretched across branches, stones placed to support them, areas protected from wind and exposure. These are not temporary pauses, they are beginnings. You might find yourself thinking about how small these changes seem, how simple, and yet how significant. Because this is where the idea of staying truly begins. You kneel beside a low structure touching the materials. The surface is rough but stable, carefully arranged. You imagine how many times it has been adjusted, reinforced, improved. A point often raised in studies of early settlements is that even simple shelters required ongoing maintenance, encouraging repeated effort and attention to the same location and over time. You see that clearly now. Nothing here is left untouched. Everything cared for. Maintained. You stand again looking across the space. More people are present than before. The group has grown. Not dramatically, but noticeably. You observe how they move around one another. More interactions, more shared activity. less distance between individuals. A detail sometimes emphasized by researchers is that the development of early settlements often led to increased population density, which in turn influenced social behavior and group dynamics. You feel that closeness now. It changes the atmosphere, the way people respond, the way they move. There is more awareness, more interaction. You might compare this to modern cities where people live close together, constantly aware of one another. Here the scale is smaller, but the effect is similar. You walk toward the edge of the space where the land begins to open again. From here you can see how the settlement sits within the larger environment, not separate, but distinct, a place within the landscape, defined not by walls but by use. You take a slow breath. The air feels steady, balanced, and as you stand there you begin to notice something deeper. With this level of organization, life becomes more predictable. Tasks are repeated. Spaces are known. Roles begin to form, not assigned, but emerging. One person tends the fire regularly. Another gathers materials. These roles are flexible, but consistent. Some researchers suggest that as human groups became more settled, specialization began to emerge where individuals focused more on certain tasks based on skill or experience. Others remain cautious, noting that early roles were likely fluid and constantly changing. You see that fluidity here. No one is fixed in a place, but patterns exist, and those patterns shape behavior. You walk slowly through the settlement again, noticing how everything feels more connected, each part supporting the others, each action contributing to the whole. And in that connection, something important begins to happen. The environment no longer dictates every aspect of life. Humans begin to shape their surroundings more actively, creating spaces, maintaining them, improving them over time. You might wonder what this means for evolution. If humans can control their environment even in small ways, does the need for the body to adapt as quickly begin to decline? Does the pressure shift from physical change to something else? Researchers continue to explore how the rise of early settlements influenced human evolution, with some suggesting that cultural and technological developments began to play a larger role in shaping human life. You feel that shift now, not as a sudden change, but as a gradual rebalancing. The body still matters, but so does behavior, so does knowledge. So does the ability to organize and maintain a shared space. You sit once more, letting your body rest. The ground is familiar, comforting. The sounds around you are steady, soft, repetitive. There is a sense of continuity here, of life unfolding within a structure that is no longer entirely shaped by the unpredictability of the environment. And as you sit there, you begin to understand that this moment, this quiet emergence of structured living, is one of the key steps toward a future where evolution will no longer be driven in the same way. Because when humans begin to build their world, they also begin to shield themselves from it. And in that shelter, the forces that once shaped them so directly begin to soften, opening the way for a new kind of change, one that moves more slowly, and often more quietly. You rise slowly from the familiar ground, your body carrying the calm of this place with you. The settlement hums quietly behind you, not with noise, but with steady activity. Small movements, repeated actions, a rhythm that no longer depends entirely on the unpredictability of the land. You begin to walk along the outer edge of the space. The air feels steady, warmer than before, held gently within the boundaries of human presence. And as you move, you begin to notice something subtle. Tools are no longer just carried. They are placed, stored, left in certain areas. You pause near a small collection of objects resting against a stone. Simple tools, carefully shaped, positioned together as if they belong to this place. You crouch slightly, observing. These tools are not being used at this exact moment. They are waiting. A well-established idea in the study of early societies is that as humans became more settled, tools and resources were increasingly kept in specific locations rather than carried at all times, reflecting a shift toward place-based living. You feel that shift here. The need to constantly carry everything has begun to fade, because there is somewhere to return to. You stand again, continuing your slow walk. Nearby, someone picks up a tool, uses it briefly, and then returns it to nearly the same spot. The motion is natural, unforced, a pattern repeated often enough to become instinct. You might find yourself reflecting on how different this is from earlier moments when every object had to be kept close, ready to move at any time. Now movement is selective. You walk a little further and notice another change. Certain tools are more refined, edges sharper, shapes more consistent, the result of repeated improvement. A perspective often discussed in archaeology is that as tools became more specialized, they began to take on distinct functions, each designed for a particular task rather than serving multiple purposes. You pick up a small object from the ground. It fits into your hand more comfortably than earlier tools you have seen. Balanced, intentional. You turn it slightly, feeling its weight. Its shape suggests a purpose, not general use, but specific. You place it back down carefully. There is a quiet understanding here that these objects matter. They extend the body, enhance it, and slowly as you observe, you begin to sense something important. When tools improve, the body does not need to change as quickly. Tasks that once required strength can now be assisted. Tasks that once required precision can now be supported. A lesser-known observation in studies of human evolution is that technological advancement may have reduced certain selective pressures on physical traits, allowing cultural solutions to take on a larger role in survival. You feel that possibility here. The environment still exists, still influences, but it is no longer the only force shaping outcomes. You continue walking, your steps soft. The ground remains familiar, the sounds around you steady, and as you move, you begin to notice how people interact with their tools, not just using them, but relying on them, trusting them. A person kneels to prepare food using a tool to cut more efficiently than before. Another shapes material with careful precision, creating something that will be used later. There is less struggle, less effort required for each task. You might compare this to modern technology where tools often replace effort entirely. Here they assist, they enhance, they make life more manageable, and in doing so they begin to change the balance between human and environment. You pause near a small working area. The ground is covered with fragments of stone, evidence of repeated shaping, repeated refinement, each piece a small step toward improvement. A detail sometimes noted is that the accumulation of small technological improvements can have a compounding effect, gradually transforming how people live without any single moment appearing revolutionary. You see that clearly now. No single tool changes everything, but together they shift the entire system. You stand again, taking a slow breath. The air feels calm, the temperature stable, and your body, once constantly adapting to external pressures, now begins to rely more on what has been created. You begin to walk again, your awareness deepening. This is where evolution begins to take on a new form, not driven only by natural selection acting on the body, but influenced by the tools humans create, by the ways they modify their environment, by the systems they build. Researchers continue to explore how technology has influenced human evolution, with some suggesting that cultural and technological changes have altered the direction and pace of biological adaptation. You feel that shift now. It's not visible in any single moment, but it is present. The body is no longer the only solution. The mind, the hands, the tools, they all work together. You glance back briefly at the settlement. It sits quietly within the landscape, stable, structured, shaped by human effort. And as you turn forward again, continuing your slow walk into the night, you carry with you the understanding that something fundamental has changed. Humans are no longer only shaped by the world around them. They are shaping it in return, and in that exchange, the forces of evolution begin to shift, becoming less about survival through physical change and more about adaptation through creation, through knowledge, through the quiet, steady development of tools that reshape the balance between body and world. You continue along the outer edge of the settlement, the quiet presence of tools and structured spaces still lingering in your awareness. The air remains steady, the ground familiar, and for the first time there is a sense that survival here is not as uncertain as it once was. You walk slowly, unhurried, and as you move you begin to notice something deeper. More people, not just slightly more, but noticeably. The space feels fuller, more active, more connected. You pause near a small gathering where several individuals sit close together. Their movements are calm, but there is a subtle difference in the atmosphere. Less urgency. More time. You watch as one person tends to another who rests on the ground. Their movements are careful, attentive. They offer water, adjust positioning in, remain as close. There is no sense of abandonment, no distance. A widely accepted understanding in human history is that as societies became more stable, individuals who might not have survived in harsher conditions were able to live longer due to care from others and improvements in living conditions. You see that here. Survival is no longer entirely dependent on individual strength. It is supported, shared. You might find yourself wondering how this changes the process of evolution. If individuals who are weaker or injured can still survive and contribute, does the pressure that once shaped physical traits begin to lessen? Some researchers suggest that the development of care within human groups may have reduced certain forms of natural selection, allowing a wider range of traits to persist. Others argue that new forms of selection such as social and cognitive abilities may have become more important. You sit nearby observing quietly. The person receiving care remains still breathing slow, steady. The one assisting does not rush. There is patience in every movement. You notice how others remain close, aware, connected. This is not an isolated act. It is part of the group. A detail often highlighted in studies of early human societies is that evidence of healed injuries in ancient skeletons suggests that individuals were cared for over extended periods, indicating strong social support systems. You feel that support now, not as an idea, but as presence. You lean slightly forward, your hands resting on the ground. The earth feels steady, familiar, and within that steadiness you begin to sense how something fundamental has shifted. Survival is no longer only about immediate strength or perfect adaptation. It includes care, cooperation, support. You watch as the person being cared for shifts slightly, then settles again. The one assisting adjusts without hesitation, responding to even the smallest movement. There is a quiet attentiveness here, a constant awareness of others. You might compare this to modern medicine, where care is structured, formalized, and often separated into systems. Here it is direct, personal, immediate. You take a slow breath. The air feels calm, warm, and as you sit there, you begin to understand how this changes the pressures that once drove evolution. When individuals can survive despite injury or illness, traits that might have been selected against in harsher conditions can remain within the population. This does not stop evolution, but it changes its direction. Researchers continue to explore how the rise of social care influenced human development, with some suggesting that it allowed for greater diversity within populations, while others point to the increasing importance of social intelligence and cooperation. You look around the group, their movements are gentle, measured. There is no urgency, only presence. You notice how children remain close to adults, how older individuals are still part of the group, still included, still present. Time feels different here, longer, more continuous. A lesser-known observation is that increased survival rates may have allowed knowledge to accumulate across generations as more individuals live long enough to pass on experience and skills. You feel that accumulation now, not visible, but present in the way people act, in the way they know what to do, in the way they respond without hesitation. You stand slowly. Your body feels relaxed, grounded. And as you begin to walk again, you carry with you the sense that something has changed in the very structure of human life. The environment still matters, the body still matters, but now so does care, so does connection, so does the ability to support others. You walk along the edge of the settlement, once more your steps soft. The sounds around you are steady, familiar. And within that familiarity, you begin to sense how evolution is no longer driven only by who survives alone. It is shaped by who survives together, by the bonds that hold people in place, by the systems of care that allow more individuals to continue. You take another slow breath. The air fills your lungs, then leaves quietly. And as you move forward, you begin to understand that this shift, this quiet expansion of survival through care and stability, is one of the reasons why human evolution begins to feel slower, less visible, less urgent, because the forces that once shaped it so directly have begun to soften, not disappear, but change. And in that change, evolution continues, but in ways that are harder to see, woven into the fabric of human connection and the quiet decision again and again to care for one another. You move gently away from the place where care quietly unfolded, carrying with you the sense that something has deepened in human life. The air remains calm, the ground steady, and the rhythm of the settlement continues behind you without interruption. Your steps remain slow, measured. You are no longer simply observing survival. You are beginning to notice systems, subtle ones, invisible at first, but present. As you walk along a familiar path, you begin to sense that the forces shaping human life are no longer as direct as they once were. The cold still exists, hunger still appears, danger has not vanished. But something stands between those pressures and the body. Something softens their impact. You pause near a small rise, looking out across the settlement and the land beyond it. The contrast is clear. Outside, the environment remains unpredictable. Inside, there is a growing layer of control. A widely accepted concept in biology explains that natural selection operates through environmental pressures that influence which traits become more common over time. You feel those pressures here, but you also feel how they are changing, no longer constant, no longer overwhelmed. You sit slowly on a low stone, your body settling easily into place. The air brushes lightly against your skin, comfortable, balanced. And as you sit there, you begin to notice something subtle, variation among the people around you. Differences that once might have mattered more, now less so. Some individuals move more quickly, others more slowly. Some carry more strength, others rely more on tools or assistance, and yet all remain part of the group. A point often discussed by scientists is that natural selection does not disappear in stable environments, but its intensity may decrease, allowing a wider range of traits to persist. You see that clearly now. Survival is no longer a narrow path. It has widened. You watch as a person uses a tool to complete a task that once required greater physical effort. Another relies on the support of others to move more comfortably. A third takes time to rest without falling behind. These differences are accepted, integrated. You might find yourself wondering how this affects the long process of evolution. If fewer traits are strongly favored or rejected, does change begin to slow, or does it simply become less visible? Some researchers suggest that in more stable environments, evolutionary changes may occur more gradually, influenced by subtle factors rather than immediate survival pressures. Others argue that new forms of selection continue to operate, but in ways that are harder to detect. You lean forward slightly, resting your hands on your knees. The ground feels steady, the air calm, and within that calm you begin to understand something important. Natural selection has not stopped. It has shifted. The pressures are still there, but they are filtered, modified. You might compare this to modern life, where technology and social systems reduce many immediate threats. The body is no longer exposed to the same constant challenges, but new influences emerge. You stand slowly, your movements smooth. As you begin to walk again, you notice how attention has changed. People are less focused on constant scanning of the environment, more focused on tall kiosks, on interaction, on maintaining the space around them. A lesser-known observation sometimes raised is that as environmental pressures decrease, social and cultural factors may play a larger role in shaping human behavior and development. You feel that transition now. The group moves with confidence, not because the world is easier, but because they have learned to manage it, to soften its impact. You walk along the edge of the settlement once more, your steps quiet. The sounds around you are steady, familiar, and within that familiarity you begin to sense how the nature of change itself is evolving. No longer driven only by survival against the environment, but influenced by how humans interact with one another, how they organize, how they create, how they support. You pause again, looking back. The settlement rests quietly within the landscape, not separate, but distinct, a space where the forces of nature are still present but no longer absolute. You take a slow breath. The air fills your lungs, then leaves softly. And as you stand there, you begin to understand why the idea that humans have stopped evolving feels so compelling. Because the changes are no longer obvious, no longer immediate. They're more immediate. They are subtle, distributed, hidden within behavior, within systems, within choices. You begin to walk again, moving forward into the night, your steps soft, your awareness steady, and as you continue, you carry with you the understanding that evolution has not ended. It has simply become quieter, less visible, shaped not only by the environment, but by the growing complexity of human life and the ways in which humans now stand between themselves and their forces that once shaped them so directly. You continue walking. The quiet realization lingering with you that change has not stopped, only softened. The settlement fades gently behind you, though its presence still shapes the way you move, the way you think, the way you notice the world. The land ahead feels open again, but not unfamiliar. You carry understanding with you now. Your steps remain slow. Even the air feels calm against your skin, neither cold nor warm enough to demand attention. For the first time, your body does not need to constantly adjust, and that in itself feels like something new. You walk along a gradual slope, your eyes scanning the distance. The people you see now look familiar. Their movements, their posture, their rhythm. There is a consistency, a shared form. A broadly accepted scientific view explains that modern Homo sapiens developed a relatively stable physical form tens of thousands of years ago, with only minor variations appearing across populations. You notice that stability here. Differences still exist, but they are smaller, less pronounced, not as strongly shaped by immediate survival demands. You pause watching a small group nearby. Their bodies move with quiet efficiency, but there is less variation in how they carry themselves. Their posture, their stride, their balance. It feels standardized in a way that earlier moments did not. You might find yourself wondering when this shift occurred, when the wide range of physical differences began to narrow into something more consistent. Some researchers suggest that as humans spread across the world and adapted to a wide variety of environments, certain core traits became more stable, while others varied only slightly depending on local conditions. Others question how much of this stability is due to reduced environmental pressure versus ongoing but subtle forms of adaptation. You continue walking, your steps soft against the ground. The sounds around you remain gentle, nothing sharp, nothing urgent, and as you move, you begin to notice something else. The body feels complete, not in a perfect sense, but in a stable one. There is no strong sense that it needs to change, that it's lacking something essential. A detail sometimes discussed in evolutionary biology is that once a species reaches a form that is well suited to a wide range of environments, the rate of noticeable physical change may slow, especially if survival pressures are less intense. You feel that balance now. The body works, it functions effectively. It adapts when needed, but does not require constant transformation. You take a slow breath. The air moves easily in and out of your lungs. There is no strain, no resistance, and in that ease you begin to understand something important. Evolution does not always push towards something new. Sometimes it settles, not permanently, but for a time. You walk past a small group resting near a gentle rise. Their movements are relaxed, their bodies at ease. They do not appear to be under pressure, not in the way earlier humans were. You might compare this to modern life, where the human body still functions in environments very different from those in which it evolved, yet remains largely unchanged in its basic structure. You look at your hands again, then at the people around you. There is a shared design, a consistency that feels stable, and yet you know that change has not stopped. It simply no longer appears. Some researchers propose that genetic changes continue to occur within human populations, but often at a scale that is not immediately visible, influencing aspects such as disease resistance or metabolism. Others emphasize that many changes today are influenced more by culture and technology than by direct environmental pressure. You begin to walk again, your steps steady, your awareness calm, and as you move, you begin to sense how this stability can create the impression that evolution has ended, because there are no dramatic shifts, no visible transformation, just a continuation of what already works. You pause once more, looking out across the land. It stretches quietly before you. The people within it move calmly, their forms familiar, their actions predictable. And in that familiarity, you begin to understand why the idea of stopped evolution feels so convincing, because the body no longer needs to change rapidly to survive. It has reached a point of balance, a point where the environment can be managed, where challenges can be addressed through behavior, through tools, through cooperation. You take a slow breath. The air feels steady, your body relaxed. And within that calm, you begin to sense the deeper truth. Evolution is still present, still active, but it has moved into the background, into details, into systems, into processes that unfold over long periods of time. You begin to walk again, your steps soft, the ground beneath you familiar, the night calm. And as you continue, you carry with you the understanding that human evolution did not stop because it reached an end, but because it reached a kind of balance where change continues, quietly, almost invisibly, within a form that no longer needs to shift dramatically to survive. You continue forward carrying that quiet sense of balance with you. The land stretches gently beneath your feet, neither demanding nor resisting. The air feels calm, almost neutral, as if it no longer presses against you in the way it once did. Your steps remain steady, unforced, and as you move, your attention begins to turn inward, not toward your thoughts, but toward something smaller, something hidden. You pause for a moment, looking down at your hands again. They look the same, familiar, unchanged, and yet you begin to sense that change might still be happening, just not in a way you can easily see. A well-established principle in genetics explains that mutations, small changes in DNA, continue to occur in every generation, introducing variation, even when physical differences are not immediately visible. You feel that idea settle quietly. Change has not stopped. It has simply become microscopic. You begin to walk again, slower now, more aware. The ground beneath you feels steady, but your attention is no longer focused on the surface. Instead, it drifts toward the idea of something unfolding beneath everything you can observe. Inside the body, inside each pore. Each having a subtle process, constant, unseen. You pass a small group, their movements calm and familiar. Nothing about them appears different. No obvious signs of transformation, no dramatic shifts. And yet within each of them change continues. A detail often discussed in modern biology is that most genetic mutations do not produce noticeable effects, either because they are neutral or because their impact is too small to observe without careful study. You might find yourself wondering how many of these changes are happening at this very moment. How many small variations are quietly entering the human population? You take a slow breath. The air feels steady, and within that steadiness you begin to understand something important. Evolution does not require visible change. It only requires variation. You continue walking your steps. The landscape remains calm, but your awareness has shifted. You are no longer looking for differences you can see. You're sensing differences that might exist beneath the surface. You notice how similar everyone appears. Their movements, their forms, their behavior. There is consistency, stability, and yet within that stability countless tiny differences exist. Some researchers suggest that genetic diversity continues to accumulate within human populations even in the absence of strong environmental pressures, providing a reservoir of variation that may become important in future conditions. Others question how much of this variation will have meaningful impact given the buffering effects of modern life and social systems. You walk a little further, your pace slowing again. There is no need to hurry, no urgency pulling you forward. And in that calm, you begin to sense how evolution has shifted into something quieter, not driven by immediate survival, but by slow accumulation. Small changes, layered over time. You might compare this to modern technology updates where changes occur frequently, but each individual update is small, almost unnoticeable on its own. Only over time do they add up to something more significant. You glance again at your hands. They look the same as before. And yet if you could look closer, far closer than your eyes allow, you would see that no two individuals are exactly identical. Each carries a slightly different version of the same design. You take another slow breath. The air feels calm, your body relaxed. And as you stand there, you begin to understand why it can feel as though evolution has stopped. Because the changes are no longer visible at the level of everyday experience. They do not reshape the body in obvious ways. They do not alter appearance dramatically from one generation to the next. They remain hidden, subtle, quiet. A lesser-known observation sometimes noted is that in populations where survival is less tightly constrained by environmental pressures, many genetic changes may persist without being strongly selected for or against. You feel that possibility now, a kind of openness. a widening of what can exist without immediate consequence. You begin to walk again, your steps slow and even. The ground beneath you feels steady. The night remains calm. And as you move, you carry with you the understanding that evolution has not stopped at all. It has simply moved inward, into the smallest details, into the unseen layers of life, continuing, quietly, patiently, waiting for conditions that may one day bring those hidden changes into the light. You continue forward the idea of unseen change lingering quietly in your awareness. The night remains calm, the land steady beneath your feet, and your body moves without effort as if it has found a comfortable rhythm it no longer needs to question. Your attention begins to drift upward, not fully, just enough to notice the space around your head, the way you think, the way you observe. You walk slowly, letting that awareness settle, and gradually you begin to notice something different, not in the body, but in the mind. You pause near a gentle rise in the land where the sky opens wider above you. The stars remain scattered across it, distant and steady just as they were before, and yet the way you experience them feels different. You're not just seeing them, you are thinking about them. A widely recognized idea in human evolution is that the human brain underwent significant expansion over hundreds of thousands of years, particularly in areas related to reasoning, planning, and social interaction. You feel that capacity now. The ability to reflect, to imagine, to question. You sit down slowly, your body relaxed. The ground feels cool, familiar. And as you sit there, your thoughts begin to move more clearly. Not rushed, not scattered, but present. You begin to notice how your awareness can shift between the immediate and the abstract, from the ground beneath you to the sky above, from what is happening now to what might happen later. This ability feels natural, but it was not always this way. Some researchers suggest that the rapid growth of the human brain slowed tens of thousands of years ago, possibly due to the high energy cost of maintaining such a complex organ. Others propose that once a certain level of cognitive ability was reached, further expansion provided diminishing returns. You sit quietly with that idea. The brain has reached a kind of balance, like the body, capable, effective, not needing constant change. You might find yourself wondering why. Why would something as powerful as the human mind stop expanding? Or has it? You lean back slightly, your gaze softening as you look upward. The stars remain distant, unchanged, and yet your interpretation of them continues to shift. A detail sometimes noted is that the human brain consumes a large portion of the body's energy even at rest, making further increases in size or complexity potentially costly in terms of survival. You feel that balance now. The mind is powerful, but it is also efficient. It does what it needs to do, without excess. You take a slow breath. The air feels calm, your body at ease. And within that ease, your thoughts begin to slow even further. You notice how easily your mind moves between ideas, between observation and reflection, between what is and what could be. This flexibility matters. It shapes how humans interact with the world, how they solve problems, how they create. Some researchers suggest that rather than continuing to grow in size, the human brain may have become more efficient over time, improving in function without dramatic physical change. Others continue to question how much change has truly occurred, noting that our understanding of brain evolution remains incomplete. You sit quietly for a moment longer, letting the thoughts settle. The night remains still, the air steady, and as you begin to stand again, you carry with you the sense that evolution has not stopped in the mind. It has simply shifted from growth in size to refinement to efficiency. You begin to walk once more, your steps soft. The ground beneath you familiar, and as you move, you begin to notice how knowledge accumulates, not in the body, but in the mind, in memory, in learning. One person knows how to shape tools, another knows where to find food, another understands how to maintain shelter. These are not genetic changes, they are learned, shared, passed on. You might compare this to modern education where knowledge is transmitted across generations without altering the body itself. And this is where something important begins to emerge. Evolution is no longer limited to biology. It is expanding into culture, into learning, into shared understanding. A perspective often discussed is that cultural evolution, The transmission of knowledge and behavior can occur much faster than biological evolution, allowing humans to adapt quickly without physical change. You feel that speed now? Ideas moving faster than bodies, learning, spreading more quickly than traits. You take a slow breath. The air feels steady, your body relaxed. And as you continue walking through the calm night, you begin to understand that one of the reasons human evolution appears to have slowed is because another form of evolution has taken its place. One that moves through the mind, through knowledge, through the quiet sharing of experience. And in that shift, the human story continues, not through visible transformation, but through thought, through learning, through the steady expansion of understanding that shapes the world just as deeply. Even if it leaves no immediate mark on the body, you continue walking, carrying that quiet awareness of the mind with you. The ground beneath your feet remains steady, the air calm, and your body moves without effort, as if everything has settled into a gentle equilibrium. Your thoughts, however, feel more active. Not restless, just capable. You notice how easily your attention shifts from the world around you to ideas that exist beyond it. From what you see to what you understand, you slow your pace slightly, letting that awareness deepen. Ahead, a small group gathers near a familiar space. Their movements are calm, but there is a difference in what they are doing now. Less searching, more creating. One person shapes a tool with careful precision. Another arranges materials in a way that suggests planning, not just reaction. A third gestures towards something that is not immediately present, as if describing or imagining. You step closer, quietly, observing. This is not just survival, it is intention. A widely discussed idea in human development is that cognitive abilities such as planning and abstract thinking allow humans to solve problems and adapt to challenges without needing immediate physical changes. You see that clearly now. A tool is shaped before it is needed. A space is arranged before it becomes necessary. An action is considered before it is taken. You might find yourself reflecting on how powerful this is. The ability to think ahead, to prepare, to imagine outcomes that have not yet occurred. You kneel slightly, watching more closely. The person shaping the tool pauses, examining it from different angles, adjusting small details. The process is not rushed. It is thoughtful, deliberate. A perspective sometimes highlighted is that as human intelligence increased, the need for immediate physical adaptation may have decreased, since problems could be solved through behavior and innovation instead. You feel that shift here. The body is no longer the only solution. The mind steps in. You stand again, your movement slow. The air remains calm, and as you look around, you begin to notice how knowledge is shared. Not just through observation, but through demonstration. One person performs tests. Another watches closely, then repeats it. The learning is quiet, but effective. A subtle observation often noted is that imitation and teaching, even in simple forms, allow knowledge to spread more quickly than genetic change shaping how groups function over time. You see that process unfolding now. Skills passing from one individual to another, without altering the body, without waiting for generations. You begin to walk again, your step is soft. The ground feels familiar. And as you move, you begin to sense how this changes the nature of evolution. When knowledge can be shared and retained, survival no longer depends solely on inherited traits. It depends on learning, on memory, on the ability to adapt behavior. You might compare this to modern life, where skills and information can be learned quickly, allowing individuals to function effectively in environments their bodies were not specifically adapted for. You take a slow breath. The air feels steady, your body relaxed, and within that calm you begin to understand something deeper. The speed of change has increased, not in the body, but in behavior, in knowledge, in the ways humans interact with their world. Some researchers suggest that cultural evolution, the accumulation and transmission of knowledge, may now be the dominant form of human adaptation. Others continue to question how this interacts with biological evolution, noting that both processes likely continue together. You feel that overlap now? The body remains stable, consistent, but the mind moves faster, adjusting, creating, learning. You pause once more, looking at the group. Their actions are calm, intentional. They're not reacting to immediate immediate pressure. They are preparing, planning, and in doing so they reduce the need for rapid physical change. You take another slow breath. The night remains quiet, the world steady, and as you stand there you begin to understand why it can feel as though humans have stopped evolving, because the most visible form of change has shifted from the body to the mind, from physical adaptation to knowledge. You begin to walk again, your steps gentle, the ground beneath you steady. And as you continue forward, you carry with you the sense that evolution has not disappeared. It has transformed, becoming something that moves through ideas, through learning, through the quiet expansion of understanding, shaping human life in ways that are just as powerful, even if they are far less visible. You continue forward, the quiet realization settling deeper within you. The land remains calm, the air steady, and your body moves without strain. There is a sense now that many of the pressures you felt earlier have softened, not vanished, but eased. You walk along a gentle path, your steps light your attention drifting outward again. The environment feels less demanding than before. The cold does not press as sharply. Hunger does not feel as immediate. Shelter is no longer uncertain. You pause for a moment, noticing how your body responds. There is less tension, less need to adjust constantly. A well-supported understanding in human history suggests that as humans developed agriculture, shelter, and later more advanced systems, the availability of food and protection increased significantly compared to earlier periods. You feel that abundance here, not excessive, but reliable. You continue walking and come across a small group resting near a sheltered area. They are not actively gathering or hunting, they are simply present, resting, talking quietly. Their bodies appear relaxed in a way that would have been rare in harsher conditions. You step closer, observing. No one seems urgent. No one seems pressed by immediate need. You might find yourself wondering how this affects the body over time. If the environment no longer demands constant effort, does the body still need to maintain the same level of adaptation? Some researchers suggest that increased comfort and stability may reduce certain physical pressures that once shaped human evolution, while others point out that new challenges such as disease or social complexity introduce different kinds of selective forces. You sit near the group, feeling the ground beneath you. It is softer here, more forgiving. You lean back slightly, letting your body rest. And as you do, you begin to notice something subtle. The pace of life has slowed. Not in movement, but in necessity. Tasks are no longer driven by immediate survival. They are spaced out, managed. You watch as someone prepares food with little urgency. Another adjusts a covering to maintain warmth. A third simply sits observing the surroundings without constant scanning. There is time here. Time to pause, time to rest. A detail sometimes mentioned in studies of early settled life is that increased food stability may have allowed for periods of rest that were less common in purely nomadic lifestyles. You feel that rest now, not as inactivity, but as ease. You might compare this to modern life, where comfort is often taken for granted yet plays a significant role in shaping behavior and health. You take a slow breath, the air feels calm, your body relaxed. And within that relaxation, you begin to sense something important. When survival becomes easier, the body is no longer under constant pressure to adapt. The need for immediate physical change decreases. You stand slowly, your movement smooth. The ground beneath you feels steady. And as you begin to walk again, you notice how the environment interacts differently with you. It no longer feels like something to overcome. It feels manageable. You might find yourself reflecting on how much of human evolution was driven by harsh conditions, by scarcity, by unpredictability, and how different things feel now. Some researchers propose that modern humans live in environments that are significantly different from those in which their bodies evolve with comfort and technology, reducing many traditional survival pressures. You feel that contrast now? The body remains the same, but the world around it has changed. You walk a little further, your steps soft. The landscape remains calm, and as you move, you begin to notice how behavior adapts to comfort. Less constant movement, more time spent in place, more focus on tasks that are not directly tied to survival. You pause again, looking around. The group continues its quiet activities. Everything feels stable, predictable, And in that predictability, you begin to understand something deeper. Evolution thrives on pressure. On the need to adapt quickly. When those pressures lessen, change does not stop, but it slows, becomes less visible, less urgent. A subtle idea sometimes explored is that reduced environmental stress may allow a wider range of traits to persist, rather than being strongly selected for or against. You feel that openness now, a kind of expansion, where variation exists without immediate consequence. You take another slow breath. The air fills your lungs easily, then leaves just as softly, and as you stand there you begin to understand why it can seem as though humans have stopped evolving, because the conditions that once drove rapid visible change are no longer as strong. The body is no longer pushed to its limits every day. Instead, it exists within a world that has been shaped to support it. You begin to walk again, your steps calm, the ground steady, and as you continue forward you carry with you the understanding that comfort, stability and control have changed the nature of evolution, not by ending it, but by quieting it, allowing it to continue in the background, slower, less visible, and deeply connected to the way humans have reshaped their world to meet their needs. You continue walking, the calm of comfort and stability still resting gently within you. The land stretches out ahead, quiet and familiar, and your body moves with a kind of ease that would have been difficult to imagine earlier. Nothing presses, nothing demands. And as you move, your thoughts begin to gather around a question that has been forming slowly across everything you have seen. Have humans really stopped evolving? You slow your pace, not to stop, just to consider. The night remains still, the air balanced, and the world feels almost too steady, as if it is holding that question for you. You pause near a low rise in the land and look outward. People move quietly in the distance, their forms familiar, their actions predictable. There is no dramatic change, no visible transformation. And that's exactly what makes the question feel so compelling. A widely recognized scientific perspective explains that evolution does not have a fixed endpoint. It continues as long as genetic variation exists and certain traits influence survival or reproduction. You let that idea settle. Evolution doesn't stop. It continues, but not always in ways that are easy to see. You take a slow breath. The air feels calm, your body relaxed. And as you stand there, you begin to consider what might still be shaping human evolution now. Not cold, not hunger, not the immediate pressures of survival, but something else. You begin to walk again slowly, your attention shifting outward. You notice how people interact, how they choose, how they form connections. These choices matter, not in an obvious way, but over time, some researchers suggest that factors such as social behavior, mate selection, and cultural preferences may continue to influence human evolution, shaping which of all traits become more common across generations. Others emphasize that the complexity of modern societies makes these processes difficult to predict or measure. You feel that complexity now. It is not as direct as before, not as visible, but it is present. You pass a small group engaged in quiet interaction. Their movements are calm, intentional. There is a sense of selection happening, not through survival, but through choice. You might find yourself wondering how different this is from earlier forms of selection where the environment played the dominant role. Now human decisions begin to shape outcomes. Who stays? Who connects? Who passes on their traits? A subtle point often explored is that sexual selection, the process by which certain traits become more common, because they are preferred, may continue to influence human evolution even when environmental pressures are reduced. You see hints of that here, in attention, in interaction, in preference. You continue walking, your steps steady. The ground beneath you feels familiar. The night remains calm, and as you move, you begin to notice how modern influences begin to take shape, not visible in the land, but in behavior, in patterns of connection, in the ways people organize their lives. You might compare this to modern society where factors such as culture, technology, and social structures play a significant role in shaping human experiences and outcomes. You take a slow breath, the air feels steady, and within that calm you begin to understand something deeper. Evolution has not stopped. It has become more complex, more influenced by factors beyond simple survival. You pause again, looking out across the landscape. Everything feels stable, yet beneath that adaptability, countless small influences continue to shape the future. A detail sometimes noted in scientific discussions is that modern humans continue to evolve in ways that are often subtle, involving changes in gene frequencies related to diet, disease resistance, and environmental adaptation. You feel that subtlety now, not visible, but present. You begin to walk again, your step soft. And as you move, you carry with you the realization that the idea of humans stopping evolution is not entirely accurate. It's more a reflection of how difficult it has become to see change. Because the forces shaping evolution are no longer as simple, no longer as direct. They are layered, interconnected, influenced by choices, culture and environment all at once. Researchers continue to explore this complexity, with some suggesting that human evolution may even be accelerating in certain ways, while others argue that its effects are simply more difficult to detect. You let that uncertainty settle. It does not need to be resolved. It simply exists. You take another slow breath. The air fills your lungs, then leaves quietly. And as you continue forward through the calm night, you begin to understand that evolution has not ended. It has become a quieter process, one shaped not only by the world around humans, but by humans themselves, their choices, their connections, and the complex systems they have created, all gently guiding the path of change, even when it can no longer be easily seen. You continue forward, the question of ongoing change settling quietly into the background of your thoughts. The land remains calm, the air steady, and your body moves with the same gentle ease it has grown accustomed to. But now something else begins to draw your attention. Not the environment, not the body, but the things humans create. You slow your pace, looking more closely. Around you, objects begin to appear more frequently, not scattered at random, but placed with intention. Tools, containers, simple constructions that hold shape even when not in use. You pause near a small arrangement. A surface has it's been cleared. Materials gathered. Objects placed in ways that suggest purpose beyond immediate need. A widely supported understanding in human history is that as technology develops, humans increasingly rely on tools and systems to solve problems that once required direct physical adaptation. You feel that shift clearly now. The environment is no longer faced directly. It is mediated, shaped. You crouch slightly, examining one of the objects. It is simple but refined. Its edges are smoother. Its form more consistent. It has been improved over time, but through repeated use. You might find yourself reflecting on how this process works, each small improvement building on the last, each generation inheriting not just traits but knowledge. A perspective often discussed in studies of technological evolution is that tools can accumulate improvements much faster than biological traits, allowing humans to adapt rapidly without changing their physical form. You stand again, your movement slow. The air feels calm, and as you begin to walk, you notice how these objects are not isolated. They are connected, part of a system. A tool leads to another. A process leads to a result. Everything builds upon what came before. You watch as someone uses a tool to shape another object, which will later be used for a different task. The chain of creation is quiet but continuous. A detail sometimes highlighted is that technological systems often grow in complexity over time, with each innovation creating the possibility for new ones. You see that clearly now. No single tool changes everything, but together they transform how humans interact with the world. You might compare this to modern technology, where devices and systems extend human ability far beyond natural limits. Here the process is simpler, but the principle is the same. You take a slow breath. The air remains steady, your body relaxed, and as you move, you begin to understand something important. Technology does not just assist the body. It replaces certain needs for adaptation. If a tool can cut more efficiently, the body does not need to become stronger. If a shelter can provide warmth, the body does not need to develop additional protection. If food can be stored, the body does not need to endure long periods without it. Some researchers suggest that technological advancement may reduce selective pressures on physical traits, while others argue that it introduces new forms of selection related to cognitive ability and social interaction. You feel that balance now. The body remains important, but it is no longer the only solution. You continue walking, your steps soft. The ground beneath you feels familiar, and as you move, you begin to notice how attention shifts. Less focus on immediate survival, more focus on creation, on improvement, on maintaining systems. You pause near a small working area. The ground is marked by repeated use, fragments of materials scattered around, evidence of ongoing activity. A subtle observation sometimes made is that as humans rely more on tools, the pace of visible biological change may slow, since adaptation occurs through external means rather than internal transformation. You feel that shift now. Evolution has not stopped, but it has moved outward into the things humans build, into the systems they create. You take another slow breath. The air fills your lungs easily, then leaves just as softly. And as you stand there, you begin to understand why it can feel as though humans have stopped evolving, because the most visible changes are no longer happening in the body. They are happening outside of it, in tools, in system, in technology. You begin to walk again, your steps gentle. The night remains calm, the world steady. And as you continue forward, you carry with you the sense that evolution has expanded beyond biology, becoming something broader, something that moves through invention, through creation, through the quiet accumulation of tools and systems that reshape the human experience, allowing change to continue, even when the body itself appears to remain the same. You continue forward, the presence of tools and systems fading softly behind you, yet still shaping the way you understand the world. The land remains calm, the air steady, and your body moves with that same quiet ease. But now something more subtle begins to emerge. Not something you can touch, not something you can see directly. Something in the way people behave. You slow your pace, observing. Ahead, a small group sits together, but their attention is different. Their movements are less focused on the immediate environment and more on one another. There is a shift in how they engage, less about survival, more about interaction. You step closer quietly. One person gestures while another watches closely. Their expressions change slightly, reflecting attention, curiosity, understanding. A third seems to pause, thinking before responding. There is a layer here that was not as strong before. A widely discussed idea in human behavior study is that as societies become more complex, cognitive demands shift towards social interaction, communication, and processing information rather than purely physical survival. You feel that shift clearly now. The environment no longer demands full attention. The mind turns inward, toward others, toward ideas. You sit nearby, your posture relaxed. The ground feels steady beneath you. And as you observe, you begin to notice how attention itself has changed. It moves more quickly, from one person to another, from one idea to the next. There is less stillness in the mind, even though the body remains calm. You might find yourself wondering how this affects human evolution. If the challenges are no longer physical, but mental and social, does the nature of adaptation begin to change as well? Some researchers suggest that modern environments may favor traits related to attention memory and social understanding, while others point out that these changes are difficult to measure and may not follow clear patterns. You watch as the group continues interacting. There is a rhythm to it, not as steady as walking, not as predictable as routine, but dynamic, shifting, responsive. A subtle observation sometimes noted is that increased social complexity may place new demands on the brain, even if these demands do not lead to visible physical changes. You feel that complexity now. The interactions are layered, not just action and response, but interpretation, understanding, anticipation. You take a slow breath. The air feels calm, your body relaxed, and yet your awareness feels more active, more engaged. You begin to walk again, your steps soft. The ground beneath you remains familiar, but your focus is no longer on it. It moves towards behavior, toward patterns of thought. You notice how people respond not only to the environment, but to each other's reactions. A gesture is followed by a pause by response, each moment building on the last. You might compare this to modern life, where much of human experience is shaped by interaction, communication, and shared understanding rather than direct engagement with the natural environment. You continue walking your pace slow, and as you move, you begin to sense how this shift influences evolution. The pressures are no longer external. They are internal, social. Cognitive. A perspective sometimes explored is that in complex societies, selection may act more strongly on traits related to behavior, personality, and social interaction than on physical characteristics. You feel that possibility now, not as something you can see, but as something you can sense. The body remains stable, but the mind continues to navigate increasing complexity. You pause once more, looking at the group behind you. Their interactions continue, quiet, layered, meaningful. You take another slow breath. The air fills your lungs, then leaves softly. And as you stand there, you begin to understand why evolution feels so different now. Because the changes are no longer happening in ways that are easy to observe. They are happening in behavior, in thought, in interaction. You begin to walk again, your steps gentle. The night remains calm, the world steady. And as you continue forward, you carry with you the understanding that human evolution has not stopped. It has shifted into the unseen spaces of the mind, into the patterns of interaction, into the quiet complexity of social life where change continues, subtle, constant, and deeply intertwined with the way humans think, connect, and understand one another. You continue forward, the quiet complexity of human interaction still echoing softly in your awareness. The land stretches out ahead, calm and steady, and your body moves without resistance, as if it has fully settled into this slower, more predictable world. But as you walk, something else begins to take shape, not in any single moment, but in the pattern of everything around you. You begin to notice how the environment itself is no longer purely natural. It has been shaped, adjusted, guided. You slow your pace, looking more carefully. Paths are clearer. Ground is more worn in certain directions. Spaces feel organized even when no one is actively working within them. This is not wilderness in the way it once was. It is something else. A widely accepted understanding in human history explains that as populations grow and settlements expand, humans begin to alter their surroundings more significantly, creating environments that reflect their needs and habits. You feel that influence here. The land still exists, but it has been touched, changed. You walk along a path that feels more defined than any you have followed before. Your feet fall naturally into place, guided by the impressions left by others. You might find yourself thinking about how different this is from earlier movement, where each step required constant awareness and adjustment. Now the path does some of that work for you. A perspective often discussed is that built or modified environments can reduce the need for constant adaptation, allowing humans to rely on the stability of their surroundings. You feel that stability now. The ground is predictable, the direction clear. You pass by an area where structures are more consistent, not elaborate but repeated in form. Similar shapes, similar arrangements. There is a pattern, a design. You pause briefly, observing. This is no longer just shelter. It is environment. A detail sometimes noted is that as human environments become more structured, they begin to influence behavior in a turn, shaping how people move, interact, and live within them. You see that clearly now. People follow paths, use them spaces in similar ways, repeat actions within these constructed environments. You begin to walk again, your steps slow, and as you move, you notice how the environment supports you. The ground is easier to navigate, shelter is more reliable. Resources are closer at hand. You might compare this to modern urban life, where environments are designed to make movement and daily tasks more efficient, reducing the need for constant adaptation. You take a slow breath. The air feels calm, your body relaxed, and within that calm you begin to understand something important. When the environment is shaped to fit human needs, the pressure for the body to adapt decreases even further. The world becomes easier to live in, more stable, more predictable. Some researchers suggest that human-created environments may significantly alter evolutionary pressures, while others emphasize that new challenges such as crowding or resource competition continue to influence development in different ways. You feel that balance. Oh, the old pressures have softened, but new ones quietly emerge. You walk a little further, your awareness steady. You notice how people move through this environment. Their steps confident, their paths known. There is less hesitation, less uncertainty. A subtle observation sometimes made is that familiarity with structured environments can reduce cognitive load, allowing individuals to focus on other aspects of life. You feel that shift now, less attention on survival, more on interaction, on thought, on creation. You pause again, looking out across the space. The settlement no longer feels like a temporary gathering. It feels established, integrated into the land, and yet it continues to change. Gradually, quietly, you take another slow breath. The air fills your lungs, then leaves softly. And as you stand there, you begin to understand why evolution has become harder to see. Because humans are no longer only adapting to the environment, they're redesigning it, shaping it in ways that protect them from many of the pressures that once drove visible change. You begin to walk again, your steps gentle. The ground beneath you steady, the night calm, and as you continue forward, you carry with you the realization that human evolution has not ended. It has been redirected into the environments humans create, into the systems they build, into the quiet transformation of the world itself, which now changes alongside them, allowing evolution to continue, not just within the body, but within the spaces humans inhabit. You continue forward, the shaped landscape gradually settling into the background of your awareness. The paths, the structures, the quiet order of human life all remain, but your attention begins to shift again, this time toward understanding itself. You walk slowly along the familiar route, your steps soft, your breathing steady. The air feels calm, almost still, as if the world is holding its place while something deeper unfolds. Ahead you notice a different kind of activity. Not gathering, not building, observing. You move closer. A small group stands near a simple surface where objects have been placed carefully. Not tools for immediate use, but things that seem to be examined, compared, studied. You pause at the edge, watching. One person holds an object up, turning it slightly as if trying to understand its form. Another gestures, pointing out a detail. A third watches closely, their attention fixed, their posture still. There is a quiet focus here, a deliberate attention. A well-supported idea in the study of science and knowledge is that humans eventually develop methods of observation and inquiry, allowing them to understand patterns in nature rather than simply reacting to them. You feel that beginning here. Not formal, not structured in the way modern science is, but present. Curiosity. You step closer, your movements slow. The objects being examined vary. Some are familiar, others less so. But what matters is not what they are. It is how they are being observed, carefully, repeatedly. You might find yourself reflecting on how different this is from earlier moments when attention was focused primarily on survival. Now attention turns toward understanding, toward asking questions even if they are not spoken. A perspective often discussed is that the human ability to study and analyze the world may have introduced a new layer to evolution, where knowledge itself becomes a tool for adaptation. You see that clearly now. Observation replaces guesswork. Understanding replaces reaction. You kneel, slightly watching more closely. One person traces a shape with their finger, then looks to another as if seeking confirmation. The second responds with a gesture, a small adjustment. There is a process here. Trial, correction, learning. A subtle detail sometimes noted is that early forms of systematic thinking likely emerged gradually as humans began to notice patterns and test ideas over time. You feel that gradual emergence now. Nothing sudden, nothing dramatic, just a quiet shift toward awareness. You stand again, your body relaxed. The air remains steady, and as you look around you begin to notice how this kind of thinking spreads. Not just within this small group, but outward. Others observe, learn, repeat. Knowledge moves not through the body, but through the mind. You might compare this to modern science, where understanding builds over time through shared observation and experimentation, allowing knowledge to accumulate far beyond what any individual could discover alone. You take a slow breath. The air feels calm, your thoughts clear, and within that clarity you begin to understand something important. This is another layer of evolution. Not biological, not even purely cultural, but intellectual, the ability to understand the world in a systematic way. Some researchers suggest that the development of scientific thinking has accelerated human progress far beyond what biological evolution alone could achieve, while others point out that this process is still deeply connected to the underlying biology of the brain. You feel that connection now. The mind builds upon the body, but extends beyond it. You begin to walk again, your steps soft, step soft. The ground beneath you familiar, and as you move, you carry with you the sense that human evolution has entered a new phase, one where understanding itself becomes a driving force, where knowledge shapes the future, where adaptation can occur through insight rather than physical change. You pause once more, looking back at the group. They continue their quiet observation, their attention steady, their curiosity present. You take another slow breath. The night remains calm, the world steady, and as you stand there, you begin to understand why so much about human evolution still feels uncertain. Because once knowledge becomes part of the process, change no longer follows simple patterns. It becomes complex, layered, difficult to predict. Researchers continue to explore these questions, trying to understand how knowledge, technology, and biology interact and what that means for the future of humanity. You let that uncertainty remain. There is no need to resolve it. It simply exists. And as you begin to walk forward again, your steps gentle, your awareness steady, you carry with you the understanding that evolution has not stopped. It's become something more intricate, more subtle, moving through curiosity, through observation, through the quiet human desire to understand the world, and in doing so, to change it. You continue forward, carrying that quiet sense of curiosity with you. The land feels steady beneath your feet, the air calm, and your movement unhurried. There is no longer a need to search for meaning in the environment alone. Meaning now exists within the questions themselves. You walk along a familiar path, your steps soft, your attention turning inward again. Not toward your body this time, but towards something more abstract, what remains unknown. You pause near a gentle rise and look out across the landscape. Everything appears stable, predictable. Human life moves in quiet patterns. Tools are used. Spaces are maintained. Knowledge is and yet beneath all of this there is a quiet uncertainty, a sense that not everything has been understood. A well-established truth in science is that even as knowledge grows new, questions continue to emerge, often revealing how much remains unknown. You feel that now, not as confusion, but as openness. You sit slowly, letting your body rest. The ground feels familiar, comforting, and as you sit there, your thoughts begin to settle into a slower rhythm. You begin to consider the questions that remain. Why did certain changes slow? Why did the body stabilize? Why did the mind take on such a dominant role? There are answers, but none feel complete. Some researchers suggest that human evolution appears to slow because environmental pressures have changed, reducing the need for rapid adaptation. Others argue that evolution continues at a steady pace, but its effects are less visible due to the complexity of modern life. You let those perspectives exist side by side. There is no need to choose between them. You watch as people move in the distance, their actions calm, their lives structured, and yet each of them carries something unseen. Genetic variation, personal experience, individual difference. You might find yourself wondering how many changes are happening right now, unnoticed, accumulating quietly over time. A lesser known point, sometimes discussed, is that many evolutionary changes may take thousands of years to become noticeable, making them difficult to observe within a single human lifetime. You feel that scale turn out. Time stretching beyond what you can easily grasp. Generations passing. Changes building slowly. You take a slow breath. The air feels steady. Your body relaxed. And within that calm, you begin to understand something important. The mystery is not a failure of knowledge. It is part of the process. The more humans understand, the more they uncover layers that were previously hidden. You stand slowly, your movement smooth. The ground beneath you steady. And as you begin to walk again, you carry with you that sense of quiet uncertainty. Not as something troubling, but as something natural. You notice how your awareness shifts. Less focused on finding answers. More open to observing. To allowing questions to remain. A perspective often explored is that scientific understanding is always evolving, with new discoveries refining or reshaping previous ideas rather than providing final conclusions. You feel that evolution of knowledge now. Just as the body changes, just as behavior adapts, understanding itself continues to evolve. You walk a little further, your steps soft. The night remains calm, the world steady. And as you move, you begin to sense how all of this connects. Biological change, cultural development, technological growth, intellectual exploration, all part of the same unfolding process. None separate, all intertwined. You pause once more, looking out across the landscape. It feels complete, and yet not finished. You take another slow breath. The air fills your lungs, then leaves quietly. And as you stand there, you begin to understand why scientists still find this question so difficult. Because evolution is not a single process. It is many processes at once. Some visible, some hidden, some understood, some still unclear. Researchers continue to explore these layers, not to find a final answer, but to deepen understanding, to see more clearly how human life continues to change over time. You let that thought settle. There is no need to resolve it. It simply remains. And as you begin to walk forward again, your steps gentle, your awareness calm, you carry with you the understanding that what humans cannot fully explain is not a sign that evolution has stopped. It is a sign that the story is still unfolding. Folding quietly, patiently, in ways that extend far beyond what can be easily seen or understood. You continue forward, the quiet weight of those unanswered questions resting gently within you. The land stretches out in calm familiarity, the air steady, the night soft and unbroken. Nothing feels urgent now, nothing calls for attention. Your steps slow naturally, not because you need to stop, but because there is nowhere left you need to go. You have walked through change, through pressure, through adaptation, and now you stand in a place where everything feels balanced. You pause, looking out across the landscape one last time. People move quietly in the distance, their lives steady, their forms familiar. The world they inhabit no longer feels harsh or unpredictable. It feels shaped, guided, held within the systems they have created. A widely accepted understanding in modern science is that human evolution continues, but is now influenced by a complex interaction of biology, culture, technology, and environment. You feel that complexity now, not as something overwhelming, but as something layered, subtle. You take a slow breath. The air feels calm, feels calm, your body relaxed. And within that calm, you begin to sense the future, not clearly, not in detail, but as possibility. You begin to imagine how humans might continue to change, not through dramatic physical shifts, but through quiet adjustments, small variations, changes that unfold slowly across time. Some researchers suggest that future human evolution may be shaped by factors such as genetic technology, environmental change, and global interconnectedness. Others caution that predicting these changes is deeply uncertain given the complexity of modern life. You let those possibilities drift gently through your mind. They do not need to be defined, they simply exist. You begin to walk again, but more slowly than before. Your steps soft, almost weightless. The ground beneath you feels steady, familiar, and as you move, you begin to understand something deeper. Evolution's not a journey with a clear end, it is a continuous process, one that shifts, adapts, changes direction, sometimes visible, sometimes hidden. You might find yourself reflecting on how the idea that humans have stopped evolving comes not from reality, but from perception. Because change has become harder to see, harder to feel. It no longer shapes the body in obvious ways. It moves through smaller details, through a system, through knowledge, through choices. A subtle idea often explored is that as human life becomes more complex, the signals of evolution become more difficult to isolate, blending into the broader patterns of society and behavior. You feel that blending now, everything connected. Everything influencing everything else. You pause once more. The night remains calm, the air still, and for a moment everything feels quiet, complete, but not finished. You take one final slow breath. The air fills your lungs gently, then leaves just as softly. And as you stand there, you begin to let go of the need to understand everything fully, Because perhaps the question is not why humans stopped evolving, but how evolution has changed. How it has moved into spaces that are less visible, less immediate, but no less real. You begin to walk again just a few more steps. Then you stop. Stop. There is no need to continue. The journey has brought you here to a place of quiet understanding, where change continues, even when it cannot be seen. And now as the night settles more deeply around you, everything begins to soften. The edges of the world blur slightly. The sounds grow quieter. The movement slows. You feel your body become heavier, more relaxed. The ground beneath you steady and reassuring. The air cool and gentle. You lower yourself, slowly resting. There is nothing left to observe. Nothing left to question. Only the quiet presence of the moment. The distant movement of people fading into stillness. The soft rhythm of your breathing. In and out. Slow. Even. The night wraps gently around you. The stars above remain distant and calm. Unchanging. And yet everything continues. Quietly. Patiently. Without urgency. You allow your thoughts to drift. No need to follow them. No need to hold them. They pass like soft shadows. Fading as they come. Your breathing slows further. Your body settles more deeply into the ground. Warm, supported, safe. And as the last traces of movement fade from your awareness, you are left with only this. A quiet world, a steady rhythm, and the understanding that change never truly stops. It simply becomes part of the background, part of the flow, part of the night itself. You rest there, still, calm, and slowly, gently you drift. Sweet dreams,